I'll call the meeting to order and welcome everybody to the September board meeting. Have people had a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting? And any additions or corrections to the minutes? Not, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from last session.
Okay, there's a second.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Minutes are approved. Now we're in the public comment section of the meeting, and are there any members of the public who would like to address the board? Hearing none. We'll move to bond updates. That's Greg.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you. So had a very busy month this past month. A lot of things moving right along. From a schedule standpoint, we published our updated master development schedule in July. And everything is really tracking right to that schedule at this time. There isn't anything significantly out of that. We did make one adjustment on our Sun River schedule, just to allow a little bit more time on the design side. Because Sun River follows Sisters and Lapine, it really doesn't affect us negatively. And it just felt that was really prudent to give them a little bit more time to really refine that design, not rush through anything there. So schedule-wise, everything is really holding its own.
Ask a quick question.
Yes,
When will Sisters and Lapine Library shut down?
at the end of the year, so the very first week of January,
Oh, okay.
we will be moving out of the existing facilities into the two temporary facilities. And closing the existing to then commence construction. I think our construction commencement date shows as 1/2. And that's the move date. Now, we'll actually probably be getting all the temporary facilities set up in late December. So that it's a quick move. They're small, but that's the time. So trying to keep all of the libraries open through the end of the year, through the holiday season and whatnot, and then really do the moves that very beginning of January.
Okay, great. Thank
So,
you.
yeah, so those are all progressing right along, Redmond, Sisters and Lapine, they're the ones coming up on the schedule standpoint. I will say, I'm starting to really look at the ends, right? Of, okay, we're going to start these projects and how are they going to end it at the backside, and how are we going to phase the openings and make sure that each of them have a, just a big splash opening, ample time for staff to get removed back in, get set up, and really do that. So nothing that's changed right now. That's something I'm going to study over the next few months. We have a lot of time to do that. But want to make sure we have a good plan. How do we finish the projects? Restock, move all of the collections back in, let staff get in, get set up where they're reworking their new facilities. That's something that I like to look at early. You want to be able to know that you've got the backside planned. It's in our schedules, but it's kind of where my vision is looking out at this point. And so I'll share that with you as that may develop over the coming months. But otherwise, the schedule is tracking right the dates that we've targeted and planned. The budget for last month, for the most part, I made some budget adjustments and I kind of spelled them out there in the report, which was really just moving money between projects. And some of that is to get things in balance. We had, as you know, the purchasing agent for all of the FF&E, it was kind of scattered between the projects, but our contract is what's under the general administrative cost section. And so I reallocated it back over to where our contract is being tracked, just so that it was cleaner on an accounting standpoint. So it's just a lateral movement of funds from each of those projects back over to there. The anticipated cost impacts of the time delay on the library, I pushed those back over into same thing into the general administrative as it relates to our contract. I think the other big moves is we have a lot of money in Redmond and also in Central for our early learning. And one of the things we'll talk about a little bit later is we went through the process of conceptual design on our early learning. And it was to really define scope of work and how much what we were going to do in each branch, and to really determine the detailed budgets for each branch. And so we realized, okay, we have more money than we need in Central and more money than we need in Redmond. And we needed to redistribute that between branches, downtown Bend, Redmond, and Central. And so that was another big lateral shift of funding dollars. I think the other large one was in downtown Bend, we have a budget for renewable energy. So we have a renewable energy minimum requirement that we have to meet, and that's 1.5% of our development costs, and it's defined by the state. We can spend those dollars all on one project or on multiple. For us, we're spending them on two, Redmond and the main library. And that is at Stevens Ranch. So those two is because they're new buildings and we can get the best bang for our buck. It's hard to renovate the small branches. So I transferred those dollars there. And that will allow us to maximize our renewable energy resources on both Redmond and Stevens Ranch Library. So those were the main shifts that would have shown up if you looked at there's changes in the budget, not on the bottom line, but on just how it was distributed throughout. The cost to date this past month were primarily for all design and planning costs. We did have a little bit of construction costs on Redmond, and that had to do with our DLT. That's the dowel laminated. It's a acoustical wood structure, and we awarded that contract early, and we placed our deposits with them to get in line. It's a long lead item, so that showed up in the construction line this month. It was on the report where there was a billing, and so that was that. So we'll start to see a little bit of those dollars being spent. A little bit this fall, not a lot. It'll definitely kick off in January after we start construction. So those were the budget adjustments and the costs expended. You know, currently very comfortable with where we're sitting on budget and our cost estimates. We go through and check them all of the time, whether it's, you know, Sisters, Lapine, Sun River, Redmond, Stevens Ranch. We really aren't doing a lot, of course, with downtown Bend at this point, or East Bend, nothing on those. But everything looks sound. Our contingencies have not been reduced at this point. They remain as they were previously, which is good. I'd like to be able to carry into construction our contingency at all as possible. Really set there, you know, generally when we go to GMP, the final construction cost, that's where I'll see, okay, that final cost, where did it land and how did that affect our contingency? But, so I've been very happy that we've been able to maintain our budget, the line items within each project, and not tap any contingency. So we're very healthy from that standpoint of our budget. The cost escalation, as you've heard, you know, we all are experiencing the inflation that's going on. It is affecting us. We have escalation factored into all of our cost estimates. We've been talking with our CMGCs, both Kirby Nagel Out and SunWest Builders, about what they're seeing on their side of what's going on in the construction world. There's the big world that we all live in, and then what's happening in construction costs. And, you know, it's fluctuating up, but there's some things like lumber took a big drop in the last 2 months, and it's back down to a traditional low, which is a good indicator. Lumber moves a lot, but it was, to give you a sense, it was $1,500 a board foot about 8 months ago, and it's back down to a traditional in and around $500 a board foot. So it dropped 200% over the norm. And I say normal, it's like the normal wall because lumber tracks up and down. Steel is another big factor. You know, it's not climbing as much at the moment. It's kind of more flat lines. So those are things that we do look at very closely, what's going on with them and how do we still feel confident in our escalations, and do we need to adjust them in our cost estimates. So confident that we have them appropriately planned for and budgeted for as we go forward.
And Greg, on that budget, any differences that you can see from giving up the Rumble Road property and then moving to this property? Do you still have the money that we thought we would have? How is that?
Well, the impact of that, it definitely, you know, we increased cost because we have to buy some land. We have increased cost because of the time delay. So, and also the redesign cost, at which we, you know, went through the Miller Hall approval last month, or excuse me, in July, for their contract. So there's definitely increased costs there. Then we're also looking at, okay, what are our resources, budgets that we have, funding that we have. One of the things that has been a positive is the interest earned. And we talked about that last month. We reported the current forecast on the interest earned for all of the investments of the bond dollars. And so as we earn money, those dollars are sitting in very conservative investments, as Robert can tell you more about. But Piper Sandler, our administrator, that reports regularly what they expect that interest earned is, because one, those dollars can only be used for the bond. And so we track them to make sure. And it's currently increased quite a bit to where those dollars are going to help to soften the blow of the increased cost. The other is looking at, okay, how do we design our new building at Stevens Ranch to a budget that we can afford and not, bust the bottom line. So it's a balancing act, a budget. It's something working diligently on as we go through the due diligence period for Stevens Ranch. The other projects are generally very sound. Redmond is really in good shape of its budget within its allocated dollars, running well. Same with the branches. Downtown Bend is static. We haven't really changed anything other than I moved those energy dollars out to spend them elsewhere. So the big one that is in flux is Stevens Ranch. And when we come back here in October, because the end of due diligence is in October, we'll have a full assessment of all of the entire bond budget, and complete Stevens Ranch, so that as we get to that point where we say, okay, we're ready to take action on the closing of due diligence, here is the budget, and here's the condition, and here's how we will fund the work that's planned for the Stevens Ranch location. So it's very actively going on right now.
Excuse me, Greg, I just wanted to remind board members, let's save our questions till the end and write them down on your pads. But they're good, they're great questions, but let's let Greg get through his report first because he may answer some of our questions.
Early learning, as I mentioned, we went through that, and that there's a separate summary I submitted. We brought on plus and greater than, I believe you guys met back in the spring, as a specialty designer who works for our architect Miller Hall, and they are designing our early learning aspects that go into each library. And as I mentioned, they were brought on initially just to do the concept studies to determine what are we going to do, what is it going to cost. How we have established a budget with Miller Hall for those funds that was put in. That's one of the, in the budget, we have a donations and grants line item in our funding sources. And those dollars are targeted for this early learning. And so that's been completed, and we'll go through that a little bit more later because we're ready to award that contract and release them to go full speed on all of the buildings as appropriate. They'll track right with Miller Hall as one of their sub-consultants. The other procurement, in August, we talked about bringing on a land use attorney to assist us with our evaluation through due diligence of the Stevens Ranch property. And following the board meeting, we did secure proposals from 3 firms, all who have local offices here, went through those and selected Brick's Law and brought them on board. And they've been engaged with us to on the Stevens Ranch property to really look at their specialty is looking at the requirements of a property for entitlements and approvals through the city or the county, whichever agency we would be dealing with. So they joined our team and are working side by side with us and working through that. And it kind of rolls right into the Stevens Ranch property and our entitlements. As I mentioned, to just step back and recap, we signed the PSA in July, and we have a 90-day due diligence period, which will expire in October 14th, which is 2 days after our October board meeting. And so the process that we've been going through, since July has been a lot of investigative work. So our geotech engineer went out and did a complete study of the property from a geotech standpoint, putting borings, digging trenches, and doing some ultrasonic mapping of the soil to really look for anomalies, things that would be problematic for us, that would cost us money, impact. So, we always talk about lava tubes, and we hear about them out there, and they have a way of mapping the ground to locate them and they find unusual soil structures, rock structures, and then we put borings right through them so that we know exactly what's down there. And very pleased to say that we found nothing that was concerning. Had a very good, feeling about our soils. Our structural engineers looked at that, and our civil and the architect, that geotech report, which is completed, and they have is one of those key tools for their design aspects. Our foundation systems are often driven off of this, and we're going to be able to do a very traditional, conventional foundation system, nothing special. What special generally means a lot more money, right? And so that was very pleasing that we got through that. We did a phase 1 environmental study and came through flying colors, no issues there. Didn't expect them because the land's never been used or developed, but it's a really important report that we do. So those things are done. Initial title reports have been established and ran, and legal descriptions, and things like that. It's all part of our due diligence process, and it'll come to a closing here in October. But each of these steps are really good things that say, okay, this piece is good. The other thing, and Miller Hall will do a presentation today of the conceptual design. So they came up with a new design. We saw early on some of the test fits, and they built on that. And it will really lay out the two options that we talked about of, do we need to use all of the property or not? And so they've come up with two options that we'll share with you and talk about the direction I think that we'd like to move forward on. And then where the building's gonna sit and how it fits on the property. You know, that it's not changed a lot from the test fit, but it's been really refined and looked at. And that kind of thing we met with the city on to make sure with city planning, say, okay, is there any issues here that you see with what we would be doing with this piece of property? And it's of loud use and no red flags. They're very comfortable that what we're asking for, and because we're building inside, you know, we're not building any streets or utilities or anything like that. It really simplifies our process very much. And so to date, those are informal reviews, and they're not formal submittals. Those will come in the future. But everything that we're doing is staying within where we're not going to need to ask for any variances or special considerations. And so they looked at the two options that you'll see in the site plan, with the one with the lot, to make sure, hey, is this lot feasible, that they'll be able to have a driveway and do what they want if we choose to do that. And they verified that we were good on all of those aspects. So I think that progress has been really well. Those plans also were then utilized by KNCC, our CMGC. So Kirby put together a detailed cost estimate that our team is going through. And one of the things that we've talked about, and you may have heard me say it in the past, but there's a process, it's called target value design. And what it is, you look at, for a project, how much money do you want to spend on electrical and mechanical and structure and skin, and then design to the budgets, versus go off and design and then figure out what it costs afterwards. So this process is very interactive between our design team and our contractor and ourselves to go through and look at what concept is and how much we're going to spend on each piece to maintain a budget. And so that's a very active component of what we're doing this month here in September. That has started and we're going through it, and it's making sure that contractor understands the dreams and the goals, the ideas that the architect has, and a real meeting of the minds there. So that process is working really well. We'll by the end of this month, we'll have that completed and ready so that as we move into October, we'll be able to answer the question about the budget and how does that work and what's our confidence level, right? I don't want to come here in October without 100% confidence and tell you what I believe we can achieve. And so that's my goal of where we will be at that point in time. But so those are the things that have been transpiring through all of the, whether it's the design or the due diligence period. Going through all of our utilities. That's another big thing of, okay, do we have sewer, water, power, communications, and dealing a lot with the developer and their team about how they're going to bring us the utilities, where they're at, and in coordination with them on their overall design and timeline for their development, right? They're going to deliver us this land and they're going to build the streets, and we want to make sure, okay, they're going to do what they have. And it's been a very good working relationship with them. They've been very open in sharing information with us, which is what you would expect out of a seller, but very positive. They've allowed us to have direct access with their design team so that our designers can talk to their designers and really understand. So our civil engineers talking to their civil engineer, really understand the grades and the streets and the utilities. So it's just been a very positive experience to go through, and again, nothing that is today of any concern. You know, I think there's a few things that we still need to finish up, by all means, to wrap up the due diligence period. But there's nothing today that would lead me to say we should stop, right? I don't see that out there. So that process is really kind of gone through, just looking to see if there's anything else I wanted to touch on about Stevens Ranch. Redmond, from a design standpoint, so we are going into submit for permit next week. So our construction documents are probably, they'll be at a 95% completion next week. So we're in the final detailing out of that project. That is moving along really well. We've had some good conversations with city, between the architect and them, about our plan check period and our permit period, which is looking very positive. That we were conservative on our duration for plan check timeline. City thinks that we may not need all of it, which just means we can get our permits a little bit earlier. We staggered them to get multiple permits so we could get started earlier, but it just reinforces that we're on track there. So the design is in a good condition and shape right now. With this 95% set that goes into the city for plan check, we're also going to, Kirby will, or CMGC is going to go out for subcontractor bidding with select subs. And these are subs that are long lead, and we want to engage early for what is called BIM. It's a building information modeling, and it's a coordination aspect that the CMGC does. And it's to really start to look at how they're going to put every part together, part and piece. You know, if you opened up the ceilings in any building, it's a mass of conduit, pipes, ductwork, everything. And they go through a very diligent process of how do they lay it all out so it fits. So when you get in the field, it's putting it together because they already figured out the challenges and the issues, and it reduces that substantially, which is time savings and cost savings. So that's going to start here at the end of this month. I imagine that in December at the board meeting, we will bring to you the next portion of their GMP, which will be a big piece. It'll be all the big major trades like concrete and steel and framing and all of the mechanical trades. We already brought our design build fire sprinkler sub on board previously, but we'll bring on electrical, plumbing, and mechanical. And those will all go out through the public bidding process that Kirby will manage and will oversee. But that's one of our next big purchases coming up, and it'll be in the $20 million range. So it's a big chunk, I think. It will help us lock in our budget to know where we're at. We're excited about buying our carpentry right now because of what's going on in the lumber market, as we talked about. But it also really lets us get set up with our subs on board to start planning out the building of the building and diving into that into more detail. With Sisters and Lapine, they're in plan check. We expect to get comments back from the county in that case here in October. And we'll be very similarly, SunWest Builders, who's our CMGC there, will go out to bid on those two projects to set the GMPs starting in October as well. So December will be actually a busy month with, I will expect to have pricing for both of those projects to set the GMPs on both Sisters and Lapine at that point. And that way they're geared up, ready to commence construction in January there. And at Sisters, we have the temporary trailer complex, and that's We've already approved that. It's on order. I think we're all set up there. The architect has had meetings with the city of exactly how we're going to place it on the property and adjacent to the building and everything. And they've given us their blessings. It's going through as part of the plan check and permit process. We actually permit that work as well. So that's moving well. In Lapine, we're going to utilize the Park and Recs building adjacent to the library, and that went through their board and for approval. They approved our LOI and they approved engaging into a lease and modifying. It's kind of one big room that we will utilize as the temporary space. And so it's very minor modifications that they are doing in there. So that's proceeding so that both of those temporary facilities will be ready near the end of December for us to then take occupancy and start setting them up as our temporary facilities. And so those are moving along. I skipped over in Redmond, we executed the lease on the Redmond space, and they are underway there as far as prepping the space, getting their TI permits done. We're doing a lot of planning. There's people up yesterday looking at stuff and laying out how we're going to use the space, because that serves two purposes for us. One, the temporary library space and a temporary storage facility space where we can move collection into very secure location, watertight, so that all the collection coming out that doesn't stay in circulation will go in there. Same with the existing FF&E that we want to utilize and save. So it'll give us a place to kind of surge out of the existing spaces and then back in as we deliver on those. So those two properties are going well. The Sun River project, we're in design development phase. We looked at schematic last month, and we'll see that in October, as well as all of the Stevens Ranch activity. We'll talk about Sun River design development, and had a real good work session with the design team yesterday of their progress and what their questions were, and the feedback from DPL staff of how they are going to lay things out and how the building will function. So pretty exciting to see that one coming together. So they're all moving along very well from a design standpoint. I don't know that I've too many other items, and other than just mention, downtown Bend, of course, will follow once we're well into Stevens Ranch. East Bend still on hold, pending the decision of what we want to do with East Bend in the future. I think the plan is that after we finalize Stevens Ranch, then to look at what we want to do with that property, whether we make any adjustments, investment into it, or whatever. So it remains on hold. I think that's everything I've got. Miller Hall will come up after me, and then I would like to talk about the plus and greater than early learning. But any questions on this report? Yeah.
Yeah, I had two questions. So the team is saying they want to use the entire time for the due diligence, but you said the due diligence is up 2 days after the board meeting. Can we plan on the team making a presentation about the Stevens Ranch at the October board meeting, or is it going to be pushed to November?
No, it'll happen in October. Today, they'll show you the concept design for the building, so you will see that. We want to talk about the property, the two actions. What I would expect to bring to you in October would be just kind of the results of our full evaluation. Is there anything there that says we should not move forward, that we should pull out, right? And so we're going to look at budget and schedule, two big components. All the feasibilities, one of the things this project with Stevens Ranch and the land use attorney has been working with us on is really looking and saying, hey, is there anything unusual about this property that we need to be aware of and concerned about? And I would say today, there's nothing. It is the process that we'll go through on Stevens Ranch is the process we would go through for any city approvals on any other properties here. Because we're not doing any public improvements, streets and that, and land development, we go through a site plan approval process and a building permitting process. So far those are all, but that's what we want to make sure of, to be able to say, hey, there's nothing else here that says we should not move forward with this.
I have one other question. So what is the date or tentative date for the move out of the Redmond facility into the Lease facility?
So it's currently planned for, it's like January 16th, I think, is when we do that. And that has a little bit of flux in it. We want to deliver to the contractor in February. And it has to do with, we want to make sure we move Sisters and Lapine first. And then we start the move on Redmond, is to not overtax, right, the staff and everybody. And that's something that we worked out with DPO of, okay, we can't do it all in one day. So that's when that will start, is in that time frame.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I just want, based on what Greg was just saying about the due diligence, when we originally started, we thought this would be your last chance before due diligence ends, based on when we signed the PSA, that pushed it out past the next board meeting. So we will not be having the executive session today, because we really don't have anything to decide on at this point. Just wanted to highlight that.
Okay, any other questions?
I have some questions.
Okay, Ray?
I'm a little concerned now. I understand at this point in the process, you're adjusting the budget going along. At what point are we going to have a final budget? It's got to be for the GMP occurs. Are moving things within categories such as Redmond, Central Library, the different libraries. You know, too much smoke here. They're not shifting funds out of a specific project. But you're now moving, well, I'm saying later on, we're going to be moving things out of a project in terms of children's centers. At what point are we going to have a fixed budget? Because in my mind, as owners and our responsibility, financial responsibility to the public, we're going to say, this is the budget, this is what these things are going to cost. Then there will be overruns and underruns. We need to have something to compare those overruns to, and not just that we're moving something here because it's convenient and we want to balance the budget. The budget, in my mind, is a fixed item. At what point are we going to have that fixed budget that we present to the public and say, this is what you're getting for Redmond, this is what it's going to cost, these are the things we're going to do?
Yeah, I would say, you know, because as we look at it, we have an overall budget, which is for the bond program. And then it's broken up into the individual components. As we move through, and so one of the things, you know, I allocated the contingency to each of the different projects, and that at what point are we, like, within each individual project, like able to really lock in on that? You know, I think that easily this year, and I'm thinking about, okay, as we come through with Stevens Ranch, Redmond, we're really fine tuning that budget. And for the most part, we're seeing dollars move out of the Redmond budget and get allocated, and partly because we put too much in there. The early learning is well established now that we've got concepts done, so that I don't think will change as we go forward. I think that there will be some lateral movement here over the next couple months. Ideally, that by October, most of that is settled down to really be able to lock that in. I don't expect to see a lot more movement, but I think that throughout the life of the bond, measure, as much as we put the silos, we created 4 work packages for Stevens, for Redmond, for downtown Bend, and then we grouped the small branches together. And we created budgets for within them, and then we also had the general administrative costs. I think will always be some flexibility to move money from one to the other. But I think that the budget itself is set today. And what we'll do is make adjustments to that. Really, as we move forward. I don't think that we would say, hey, Redmond is boom locked in at this dollar amount and nothing can happen to that. I don't think that's prudent use of the bond funds as a whole. I think we have to always be able to look at the total amount and watch how they're going. Now, doing it very transparent, right, is every time a dollar moves from one to another, we're going to track it, identify it, we discuss it with DPL of why that's happening. So I would say that the budgets are there today. And there's going to be some adjustments to them throughout, but I think that we can always track if there is an adjustment, why, what was its purpose, what drove it.
But Trevor's gonna come back to us with his GMP, and contractually, he's bound to that.
Oh, yes,
So
as
he's
that
got
component.
it all in there for each one of the projects, each one of the libraries.
Yeah.
So my concern is when you say, we'll take things out of red, overall, the whole budget is set because we cannot overspend the bond.
Correct.
We can underspend it,
Yes.
so we cannot overspend it. All right, and we can only spend it for what we said in the ballot measure. So that's a given.
Correct.
My concern is if we're gonna take, say, in the future, things are looking like Central is gonna cost us more, we don't have enough there. We'll take it out of Redmond. Or we'll take it totally from out of East Bend, or we'll take it out of Sisters or La Pine and all the other ones. I'm uncomfortable with that. At some point, we know this is a complex process, construction process. But each one of these has to be considered as a distinct budget unto itself.
Right.
As well as within the whole. What I'm saying is, at what point will we have the final fixed budget for, say, Redmond? For whatever the central library is, for downtown, for La Pine, Sisters?
I think those budgets are generally set now. I think that the Stevens Ranch budget is going to adjust over this, especially this coming month, as we make those adjustments based on all of the efforts we're doing here in due diligence. And so I'd be more comfortable saying, hey, after we go through that process. Now, the individual components within the budget that are big commitments, the largest commitment we will always have is construction costs with the CMGCs. And those get committed at different times throughout, right? So as we're building up the CMGC or the GMP for Redmond with Kirby. We'll do another initial GMP amount coming up here this fall. And then the final one happens after we want to get plan check comments in first before we finalize it. And that will happen in early spring, winter, actually in the first quarter of the year. So at that point, we're going to know really, we're going to have Kirby under contract to build the building for us based on our approved plans. And so call that like in the March timeframe of next year. But there's other big components that are going to continue to go. So we have a very large FF&E component to this project. It's not as big as construction, but it's, there's maybe upwards of $20 million out of this that we're spending. I don't have the exact amount on the top of my head, but it's a large component. Well, that will continue to be purchased, beyond the GMP. Those are the things that can affect dollars. Now, we allocated contingency to each budget. And those contingencies are there to deal with, hey, if there's a cost impact or overrun on a line item in the budget, that there's a contingency to account for that. So that we're not taking from one of the other projects to balance that.
Mhm.
And I think those contingencies will be utilized throughout the life of the project as we go. So I would say we're gonna have our budgets really in line here this year. I need a little bit of time with the Stevens Ranch property. I don't want to say that I'm gonna have it exactly 100% filled out. I said I want to be 100% confident, right? When I talk to you in October, but I may need to make some adjustments at that point. I think that easily this year, before we delve into deep construction, that will be figured out and set. But I do think that, especially if we look and say, hey, this project may have excess dollars. Sometimes it's not always there's an overrun, but there's excess dollars. If it's sitting there and we know we're not going to need it, then I'm going to want to move it to where it's needed, or to take it out and move it somewhere else. Just so that we always know what's the condition of each project relative to an established budget.
Yeah, to me, I mean, that makes sense to have flexibility to be able to do things like if we know that there's unneeded money in a project, and it has to do with, we have more information as the construction project moves along as a whole. So we're reacting to new data, new information, changing costs. And to me, I mean, I think we need that flexibility to spend the money in the wisest way possible. And I think Greg has been really good about providing us with the rationale for, he's provided us with the information on why money has been moved between categories each month and why that's being done. And I mean, if we, so it's up to us to look at those budget documents, to me, and if we see something happening, like if we were to see, oh, they're stripping money out of these other buildings to augment one project, that would be up to us to say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Right.
But we have those line items within each project to be able to look at each month and to see. So to me, that just is prudent. I mean, just as if you were doing any kind of construction project to adjust as you go, but I mean, not huge adjustments, but I think Greg's doing a good job in providing us with that information.
Yeah, I can't help but agree with what Ann just said. Having multiple buildings, multiple projects, it's kind of a balancing act. And I appreciate that you give us all this information every month. You answer all our questions. So it makes sense to me to have that flexibility built in.
And I'm concerned, I mean, you talk about for the project as a whole, I'm watching carefully because I don't want to make, I want to make sure that we have the money that we need to do downtown Bend. Because we have some great opportunities there to really improve the operation of that branch. Some really exciting things that are going to benefit the public. And so I want to make sure that we have the dollars left when we get to that final project to do that work.
No, and I think that is something that we look at. We try to look at that very closely to make sure that we're not, robbing from one for something else.
Right.
And downtown Bend has the most, is the most susceptible because it's last.
Right.
Right? It's always the one that could get hurt. So I think we've been trying to be very diligent about, we had a conceptual design for downtown Bend done by Miller Hall last year. And then we engaged SunWest Builders to do a conceptual cost estimate along with our cost estimator, JLD, to look at it and say, look, we know we're going to build this out in, 3-4 years. Tell us the cost and let's escalate. We have a high escalation on that and high contingency because it is future dollars. And that's like, as we went through this early learning plus with plus greater than, we realized we had too many dollars in central. And we had too many dollars in Redmond, just how we allocated the budget. And we shifted money back over into the branches and into downtown to get it more even. So like in that case, Redmond dollars and downtown are identical. In the branches, they're identical for all four. Even though we're not moving forward with anything on East Bend, we have a budget set aside for it, should you say, move forward. And then we realized, hey, we put too much into Central, to the Stevens Ranch property, that we don't need to spend it there, we need to spend it elsewhere. But I think it's back to where we are getting those budgets more tighter and allocated, so that as we move forward, ideally we don't see any fluctuations, that they are stabilized there. And to the extent there are any fluctuations, our individual contingencies will handle any adjustments necessary.
So basically you're saying, I agree, there's gotta be flexibility within this. The bottom line is you can't spend more than the bottom.
Exactly.
That's it. Second bottom line before that though, is that we owe it to the public to give them what we said we were gonna do for each of the libraries
Yes.
individually. And what you're saying here is at some point we will have a final budget. You don't know when, hopefully it'll be soon. Each one of them may be different. Ann's concern and my concern too is that the downtown library is the last one. We don't end up saying, okay, now we're gonna do the final budget for downtown Bend with what's left.
Right.
Okay, it was set. Soon, end of this year, we should have something for downtown, I'm saying, this is it.
Yeah.
This is what we think, because we have conceptual design, we don't need to buy property. And what you're saying is, if we need an overrun, if there's an overrun, you're gonna build enough contingency into each individual project that we don't have to take from other projects
Correct.
to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I want to hear.
Yeah.
I
And
think
those
that's
are
incumbent
set
upon-
today.
It's incumbent upon the board to know. We're the ones that are responsible for the final.
Yeah.
This being a very complex, I've sat through the most complex construction project I had would be 2 buildings.
Right.
So I've never sat through one that had 6. All right, possibly 7. That becomes incumbent upon the board to say, okay, at every step of the way, when there's a move of funds, like today, you're saying you're taking some of these, the funding and moving into general administrative. We need to understand that, but then we need to understand what are the consequences of that versus each individual project.
Right.
All right. It's our responsibility. We owe that. We're legally responsible. Right. And I always say to people, I'm not going to level worth for nobody. This is it. We are responsible for it individually.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And
So when we get these changes,
Mhm.
I'm hoping that the board members will sit there and say, okay, wait, this makes sense, but
Right.
why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Here's another change. I'm starting to get concerned. We need to fix it at some point. Say, this is what we're gonna do. There's always gonna be some fluctuations because of costs and things. But each project needs to have its amount in there at some point.
yeah, and when you look at the budget report summary you get, each of the sections has the contingency that's been allocated to it.
Right, the
in-
contingency is what you're going with.
Right.
Okay,
And so those contingencies, I already allocated them between the projects so that they were balanced. So that they basically all have the same percentage level that I would expect to carry on them.
Mhm.
And so you'll be able to also see that if we need to allocate from that contingency up into a hard cost, a soft cost, and FF and the owner's cost. And we'll always give you that
Right.
summary explanation of what did we do and why. And go through that.
So that
But I
would be,
think these are fairly well set.
Yeah.
The biggest adjustment here was really driven off of restructuring from Roble to Stevens Ranch, refining the early learning, and then what we wanted to do with the renewable energy.
Mhm.
So I don't expect to see a lot more. There will be a little bit here with Stevens Ranch as we are refining it this month. But ideally, you won't see a lot, I think, as we move forward from that standpoint.
The question is, well, a concern I have really is. When we went and did the letter of intent on Stevens Ranch. We made the point, this is just, we're interested. This is not to say we're going to purchase it. Caution was for the board to have in our minds to say, this is just interest. In the meantime, what other properties are available that have come on the market now that we haven't looked at? That one may be better location, cost less, whatever. There are properties coming on and off the market all the time. Just because we're interested in Stevens Ranch, we shouldn't be in the mindset to say, this is fixed. And I see in our reports and our discussions, we keep saying the Stevens Ranch Library. I'm afraid, well, my concern is, every time we say this, we're fixing it into our minds and possibly into the minds of the public, that this is a done deal. This is not a done deal. This is so far from a done deal, it's not funny. My concern is we need to stop referring to it as the Stevens Ranch Library. We just need to refer to it as a potential site for the library. Because it is a potential site.
Yeah, I think the nomenclature of Stevens Ranch Library is really, if you look at all of the library locations, they're identified by their location.
But this is not a library yet.
No, it's not. It's the location though, right, that we are. So, we entered into the LOI and from that into a purchase sale agreement, which is an executed agreement. And from there, we established the due diligence period, which is the 90 days. And at the end of the due diligence period, we can say, we don't want to move forward. We get all of our money back. Any money we expended on our own through the due diligence period is at our expense.
Right.
But we have that opportunity to step away from this project. But at this point, we have entered into that purchase sale agreement. And unless we say we're pulling out, we would continue forward with that. As of today, I will tell you, we haven't found any reasons to tell you, stop, don't go forward. We identified this as the best available property at the time that we, recommended it and selected it. I would say that Compass Commercial, as our real estate agent for DPL, they do, they're out there talking every day. That's their business, right? Real estate sales. They haven't come to us and said, wow, we have found the best property. You got to forget this deal. I think they do tell us, hey, we've heard about this property coming online, but it's not going to meet your criteria. It's not going to meet what you need. It's not better than the Stevens Ranch. So we're not out actively pursuing, looking for properties, but because of Compass's normal involvement, if there's something that comes up that they think is a better opportunity for DPL and that we should consider it, that affects time and cost and like you say, the location, the overall qualities, there's a lot of qualities that we look in a piece of property. Nothing has risen to tell us to stop because there's a better piece of property elsewhere. But like I said, we're not out actively pursuing because we're actively pursuing the due diligence of the Stevens Ranch property. And I think just name the nomenclature is so when we talk about a piece of property, people know what it is. It's located. Everybody knows where Stevens Ranch is. And so we started saying, look, we're going to talk about that just like we talk about downtown Bend or Redmond or Sisters of La Pine, right? It truly gives it's so anybody knows where it is. That's why we started that. And we told our team, talk about the property location name.
It
That's
helps
how
us
it came
to,
about.
helps us to avoid confusion from the Roble Lane property as well.
Yeah.
If we kept calling it Central, we have to differentiate Old Central, New Central.
What I'm saying is, it's a piece of property, it's not a library. We can refer to it as the Stevens Road property.
Right.
Or we can say the potential Stevens Road Library. When we refer to it as the Stevens Road Library.
It
is
doesn't
the-
say the Stevens Library.
It does say Stevens Road Library. We have that in the reports.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
references it as Stevens
Read the
Ranch
reports.
Library.
It's been saying that for 2 months now.
Okay,
All right, ever since we did the LOI. It's been referred to as the Stevens Road Library, not the property. That is incorrect, and that is putting in the minds of the board and the public and the staff. That this is where it's going to be. We can pull out at any time.
Absolutely.
We don't have to wait on the due diligence saying, oh, the lava pits here and all. Any reason at all, we can pull out, get our money back. It's just a letter of intent. What I'm questioning is, yeah, maybe Compass is out there looking. They're a very busy real estate company. Have they been told specifically, continue looking for 5 to 12 acre lots, properties for a library?
I guess I would say, I have not received direction from the library board to pursue other properties.
Oh, well. Did we, was the direction from the board that as soon as we find any potential live property, we finish? Or are we looking at properties?
If-
So we have to be more specific.
Well,
If the board would. That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
My assumption was we went through, reviewed properties, we selected one, and we've been moving forward on it.
Yeah, and
If
that's
the board would like to direct me otherwise, I would, yeah.
Wouldn't you go, we settled on the 5 or whatever properties Compass brought to us. We settled on one to write a letter of intent. Now we're going through due diligence. At the point that we end due diligence, Greg comes and says, oh, there's a big hiccup here. We need to pull out. Then we direct Compass to say, well, now we need to start looking at property.
That's exactly my point. We've already taken the perspective and set in our minds that this is the piece of property, unless there's something wrong with the property, we're gonna buy it.
But
well,
What
to
I'm
me,
saying
that
is,
is correct.
that
what I'm
is,
saying is, there are other properties at, what you said was at the time and point in which they brought us the potential properties. We had this presentation, which essentially came down to 2 properties. One of which we couldn't buy because they pulled out on us. So we were left with 1 property. Stevens Ranch. What I'm saying now is, shouldn't we continue looking? If you're interested in a house, and all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, another house comes on the market, wouldn't you expect your realtor to say, hey, this one's really nice too, and it's gonna cost you a lot less? Or it's gonna cost you the same, but it's got all these other amenities to it? They should present it to you. I think most realtors are gonna say, this is a done deal, go through with it. What I'm saying is, we should be telling, as Todd said, then we should give him direction and new direction and Compass direction, saying, you should continue to look until we finally decided on a piece of property to build on. The criteria for the piece of property is not that there's something wrong with it. Are there any other pieces of property that would meet our criteria that have come up on the market since? Or parameters for that piece of property have changed? Price, they're willing to do SDCs, whatever. Things have changed in the real estate market. Are there other properties coming on the market continuously that we should actually be looking at?
well, Ray, I think at a certain point, I mean, you could pursue that line of reasoning ad infinitum. You could continually say,
It's
well,
90
something,
days.
there's new, and to me, a letter of intent is a legal agreement. It's, I did not vote for a letter of intent lightly, because a letter of intent indicates intent to purchase. I believe that if we enter into a letter of intent, that's a good faith expression of our interest in a property. And to cavalierly cast that aside because something better might come along, what does that do to our integrity as an organization and our integrity as board members to just say, oh, well, never mind. We found something better. And I don't, you know, we went through a process again to locate the best property. And at a certain point, you have to make decisions and you have to act, and you can't continue to reevaluate and reevaluate and reevaluate. Otherwise, you could never buy anything. To say, well, you know, we're ready to write a check, but something better might come along. You never get to the point where you could procure any property. And we have devoted time, attention, money to the evaluation of this property, just like we did when we purchased Roble Road. And we did due diligence on another property and rejected it for reasons before we bought the Roble Road property. So I think, I mean, to me, this is a matter of ethics and of taking appropriate action after careful consideration of the choices that were in front of us. And if we follow what you're saying, we would never select property because there might be something better out there.
I don't think I've ever suggested that we do this ad infinitum. We take any concern and argument and add it to the absurd. And this is, I think, we shouldn't go that way. I've not said we keep looking at properties ad nauseum. I'm saying, basically, we had the choice of one property here. At the time you made the presentation. Other properties have come on. We owe it to the public and ourselves to look at least maybe another property. This is the reason we really ended up with Roble Road. We said, best property available. We bought it. Everything was fine. It's outside the UGB, it's outside the city limits. No problem. They're going to give us a variance. They're going to let us build the property. We went through the entire process. Everything was rosy. But basically, we looked at one piece of property because we didn't want to go to Juniper Ridge.
No, we looked at
several, and then
we
said,
looked at a
well,
whole range of properties, right?
Exactly.
But this one,
Property for years.
but Roble Road was not even on the radar until the very end, where they said, "Oh, this piece of property is now available to you guys," and we went, "Oh." And their recommendation is, this is the good one. And we just went and said, yeah, even though we thought we knew what all the parameters are. We knew what the problems were going to be outside the UGB, outside the city limits. City council was going to let us have an exception to this because we are the library. I don't want to go into this one in the same way saying, okay, basically we did look at one piece of property. We looked at other ones. We had a choice of one because the other one was taken away from us.
We looked at.
But that was narrowed
We looked
down
at
to
two.
those property, to the Easton property and
Uh-huh.
to the Stevens Ranch property, but
And
Compass
Compass
went through and evaluated. Ray,
More than
if
two
I said it was in excess of 20 different
That's
properties
fine.
and locations, they
What's
looked
going
at
on in the market?
areas of the city that weren't for sale to say, well, how do we go build downtown? Where's these big pieces of property? And they said, well, if you bought this land and this land, you could combine it, but by the way, they don't want to sell. They did a very extensive search of all the available properties, all the way up until we landed on Stevens Ranch and looked at what is their availability, what is the use, what's its feasibility, how did it meet our criteria, whether it was Juniper Ridge. We had conversations with Todd Taylor Development, because he bought that property. We had conversations with Polish Homes on 3 of their properties in development, and what could be done at each of those properties. Easton was one that we identified as, hey, it actually could be feasible, until they chose to pull it back from us. But it's not like we looked at one property.
No, I'm not
They
saying that.
looked at multiple
You just-
properties.
I'm
did
saying,
that.
I'm saying we, the board, looked at one property.
No, no, we looked, I think you missed the meeting where they made the presentation that had more than 24 properties on it. And they went through them in detail.
And they eliminated essentially, they were going through in detail as to not this, not this, not this, not this.
No, they
Here are the
looked
two.
and said, this is what each of these properties allows you to do. We looked at a piece of property along Highway 97 on the west side that ODOT was going to release at some point, but it had a lot of challenges. You had to build lots of roads, you had to do a lot, you had to incorporate. They looked at all of these properties and told us, here's what this property is. Here's what your
Pluses
challenges
and
with
minuses.
pluses and minuses,
Right,
and went
right.
through. And they looked at everything all the way around the city.
Mhm.
South side, north side, east side, west side, whatever was out there and available. And they talked about properties, like I said, that weren't even on the market. So that they could come back and say, we looked at every region of this city of what's out there. So that's how we got ultimately to Stevens Ranch. You know, narrowed down to where the final approval from the board was to enter into an LOI. And as part of entering into the LOI is entering into a purchase sale agreement, which has been executed. And to then commence a due diligence period. And I think there is a lot about the, you know, agreement with that seller, because we're telling them, yes, we intend to buy your piece of property. We intend to move forward with this unless we find something that is severe enough for us to be able to back out, which is the due diligence process. And I would say that we have a seller who is very, you know, excited about us being part of their development, who is moving forward with his development plans to support us, because we did say we are interested. Now, he does that at his sole risk, but he's doing it off of his belief that the board and DPL are committed to this unless we find something. And he has said, look, if you find anything and you want to back out, I'll give you all your money back and you can go. We can part ways. To me, Ray, I think we've done everything. we can.
I will also say that it's a good faith agreement on both parties. So the seller is not out there looking for other buyers who are offering a higher amount.
Right.
Can I make a suggestion that, is there a motion that we're trying to debate here? Because
Yeah,
I was gonna say, can we take a poll? I mean,
Yeah.
I know why I voted for us to do the letter of intent and due diligence, to take a poll of the board, because I don't understand this conversation.
What I'm
Yeah.
asking is, are there other pieces of
would
property
you want to
available
make a
now?
motion that we should be actively looking for other pieces of property?
Yeah, I would like the office to take another look at property that's available now. That they, other than what they looked at before. They don't have to look at everything, but it'd be nice if they would. What is available now between the 5 and 12 acre size that we originally said? And come back to the board and say, okay, here's what's available now.
Okay, do I hear a second on the motion? Motion fails for lack of second.
So basically, we're saying by this, we're gonna buy this piece of property.
We're saying we're gonna complete the due diligence period and make a decision next month.
To buy the property.
That's correct, or not.
But to me, it sounds like it's a foregone conclusion, unless there's something terribly wrong
Well, that
with
may
the
be your
with the property
interpretation.
itself. Well, no, due diligence is now, Greg is telling us, unless there's absolutely something wrong in the title or with the property itself, we are now committing to purchase the property.
But that was what the letter of intent is about.
Well, letter of
Yeah.
intent is an intent.
And you also approve the purchase and sale agreement.
That's just the legal document says this is what we would, the parameters on which we would purchase it. If we go through with it.
Well, I think
We
we've
have-
heard your
We
point,
haven't said
Ray.
anything that says. My concern was when the board said letter of intent, it was in their mind that said. It's a done deal, and it's appearing to be that way. Just my concern.
Well, all right, I think
Obviously,
we've heard your concern.
Disagree with me on that. But I don't think we're serving the public. As fiduciary agents for them. By saying a letter of intent is a done deal purchase.
I think we take your point, Ray. Do you have any further questions for Greg?
Yeah, but the thing is, everything sounds great here on the Stevens Creek. What possibly could be a roadblock here? These are the same things I heard when we looked at Rover Road and we were going through and they said, city staff agrees with everything we're saying, everything looks great. City council is going to approve our annexation or our title change. No problem.
Well, do you
And
have
now-
additional specific questions
Yeah, what's
that
your
you want
question?
addressed in due diligence?
As I asked, is there anything else here? That could possibly be a roadblock or a problem with this piece of property being developed?
So as of today, as I sit here today, I would say, I
Into the-
don't know of
into the
anything
future.
else.
Into the future.
Well, Ray, I
looking so
can't
rosy.
predict what could happen in the future.
Well, we know what we have to do if we get permits.
Right,
Right.
and the permit
Is there anything
process,
wrong there?
the city approval process for this piece of property is basically the normal standard approvals that we will go through on practically any property. So we will go get a site plan approval,
Mhm.
which is our first approval that we will do. And that is a submittal that goes in on all pieces of property to the city for them to review how we're using it to make sure that it's in compliance with zoning codes and building codes. After that, we will then go in and submit for a building permit for that, a grading permit, building permit combination. Those are our approvals that we have to secure from the governing agency, being City of Bend, that we'll go through. Now, those two processes,
That we will go through or will go through.
we will go through.
We will.
After due diligence, once we say we're moving forward, we will then enter into the real design phase. And coming out of that design phase, we will generate applications that go into the city. One for a site plan review and approval, and then for building permits and approval. Those are our two primary approval processes that we will go through,
Just like in Redmond, right?
just in identical to Redmond.
Just like in Robo Road.
No, in Roble Grove, we were acting as developer. And we were going to, there was a much greater requirement for entitlements. In this case, the Stevens Ranch Development has done all of that work and is performing that work. That was, they did their master plan, they did their annexation, they are building all of the streets and all the utilities. We don't have to do any of that. We're not subject to any of that. Now, we have to build our piece of property in accordance with the requirements of the master plan. There's nothing so far in the master plan that says we can't build what we intend to build on the property. And the requirements for us to secure approvals from the City of Bend is the site plan process, which is defined by the city of exactly how we do it, and there's nothing unusual about it. And then the building permit process, and again, there's nothing unusual about that. So this piece of property doesn't present any unique or unusual approval processes that we will have to go through. We will still go through them. They still have their process of how you get that approval, but it's the standard process that the city.
So you see no problem with us getting any of the permits?
No,
No, okay.
I don't.
And that's what the report next month is going to address. Greg's going to present a full due diligence report next month that's going to go through all these.
And that was part of like why we brought on the land use attorney. To support our team, to look at what the requirements were for Stevens Ranch under their master plan, under the city's requirements. For them to advise us of, do we have anything unique or unusual? Do we have any hurdles? Do we have to do anything that we need to plan for? And they are guiding us along. We'll have our land use consultant also advising us through that process.
May I make a suggestion? We are still in due diligence, so we should not be debating the what ifs of due diligence. You should be, and this is a test for the board. We should be able to come back to you with a very solid report so that you feel informed enough to make a decision on whether to move forward or not at the October meeting. But we cannot speculate on what may happen in the next 30 days. That's why, if we could, we would stop the due diligence process and vote right now.
No, I'm asking Greg, after the due diligence. You know, you're gonna have to do the permits. Is that, in your opinion? There's nothing there to stop us with getting the permits from the city for everything we need to have.
That is correct.
Okay, that's what I was asking, not the due
No,
diligence.
it is
So-
exactly.
So,
That's part of the
Yeah.
report on due diligence
Mhm.
is the permitting process.
the permitting process, I'm not questioning the process, I'm saying, how do you think it will? Is there anything that would block us from getting the permits themselves, acceptance?
Well, why don't
Not
we wait
that I
for
know
Greg's
of.
report?
Yeah.
In a month. That's what the report is about.
Well, okay. So.
Ray,
but
you're
what I'm
asking me to
is,
speculate on what will happen in the future.
what could
All I
happen?
can know is, are we gonna follow the standard process that the city of Bend has outlined for everybody who's gonna build in this city? And the answer is yes.
Okay,
We're gonna go through a standard site plan approval and a standard building permit approval. And we will follow their defined path. They tell us exactly what we submit, how we submit it, how it's reviewed, and then they give us their comments or approvals, right? That process for Stevens Ranch is the standard that the city uses.
yeah, and you
And
think,
that's as much as I can ever say.
right, but you don't see anything,
No.
any comments they can come back with? that
No.
would be a problem?
No.
Okay. So it's a clear shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. Do we see any kind of roadblocks or potential problems with public input? The public concept for the site or location, the size of this particular library?
No, I think that
Nothing.
it is the same as any other piece of property.
No, I mean,
If somebody
including the
has,
building.
no, right, if somebody has a comment,
Mhm.
they are free and entitled to make a comment on this property as well as any other property.
Mhm.
I can't say that there's not gonna be somebody who's gonna ask a question because they are free to do that. And there's a process that they follow to do that.
Right, right.
But I can't say, no, nobody's ever gonna ask a question. I would expect that somebody probably will.
I feel like that we have done enough due diligence in our board and in our search for properties beyond just the Stevens Ranch, but even when we searched, or this board searched for Rubble Road and other properties. We did enough due diligence that if there is public questions, we will easily be able to answer those confidently. So I don't worry about public coming back and trying to stop this project. I feel like we have done our job.
Yeah, and I don't think we could ever select any piece of property in Deschutes County that wouldn't have opponents and proponents. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. And I think that we did select this for sound reasons based on sound criteria. And so, as Bunny said, I think we can explain why this property was selected. The bottom line is there are very, very limited properties out there that are suitable for this. And
We have done our work.
we've done our homework, I think.
It all hinges on the rest of this due diligence and what you bring to us next time. Could be positive, could be negative. We don't know yet.
Right.
It's your job to do that. So we'll just wait until next time to say, no, we're pulling out, or yes, we're going forward. And that's what we were elected to do, and I feel like we've done.
Mhm.
So to be clear, 5 to 12 acres is what we were looking for. That was on the April 13th meeting, you said 5 to 12 acres.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to have that in the record.
Ray, is there some
Reason that you're
you want
asking that?
to have?
And I just want to make sure it's in the record that the properties we would consider would be 5 to 12 acres.
I'm concerned why you have a question about that.
That's what we said we were looking at, just reiterating.
But
Sure.
it should have been in last month's records anyway. Is there a reason?
Well, not.
Are you being transparent with us so that we
It-
all are on the same page?
I'm just restating what we stated. But you know, my other concern was our minutes are getting really brief, rather brief. Coming down to only motions and votes. So. I just have this on Zoom, we have, you know. Those are the size properties we were looking at.
Well, I think
And
we
this
have
was the best one to
recordings,
choose.
full recordings of all our minutes available for anybody that's asked, and I think all of our information that we've put out has been totally transparent. So for you to say, I want this on the record, implies to me that we have not been forthcoming in our discussions and that there's been some level of question. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think,
No, don't read more into my statement than there is,
okay,
right? You're impugning that there's something there. I'm just saying that's a reiteration of what we said.
Okay, thank you for reiterating, and I will reiterate that we have kept very good minutes. All of these discussions and all these decisions are well documented. We record every one of our Zoom sessions so the public can go online and watch them all. So thank you for reiterating what you just said, but it has been documented many times in our discussions over the past few months.
Excellent.
okay. Do we have any other questions for Greg, or can we move along to the next item?
And I think it's next on the list. We did have on the agenda the Lapine lease, but there isn't anything required there. Yes, Bob?
Can we, I just make a suggestion that we jump to the Miller Hole presentation because they've been waiting online
Oh,
for
okay,
this discussion before we go to the.
Yeah, that's easy.
okay. Any objections to that? Okay, let's
Can we
go.
take just a quick
Sure.
break to-
Oh, can we take a, okay, yeah, but, all right, let's take a 5-minute break.
Okay, and then Miller Hole, you were up. And
5 minutes,
5 minutes.
okay.
Did I miss something or was it?
It's okay,
a work session?
In the chat.
I was surprised when I saw that. I didn't get the agenda. Was there an agenda for work session? I didn't get it.
No, we didn't do a work session because I thought we were going to be having a long meeting. And we didn't have any work session topics.
Oh. So,
That's something that I'd like to discuss at the leadership meeting is scheduling future work sessions.
yeah, so you know, topics that we would like.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, excellent.
That would be good.
That'd be good.
Yeah. Yes, we originally thought this was going to be the day we were making a decision.
Yeah, I was wondering why it went
Oh, no,
9
I'll
to 10
take
and
it.
not just 12.
Yeah.
Hey, Todd,
I missed something.
it is still recording.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so I started as an intern. this summer. They got hired on full time 4 weeks ago, so, yeah, it's only been a few months. But, yeah. Yeah, but I've really liking it so far. I've only been done since July, so it's been interesting. Everybody says wait until Labor Day and then the city kind of plays. So I've kind of noticed that, yeah, but. Yeah, it was, yeah, I liked it a lot. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
Not so much the snow, but.
Yeah, no, hopefully this passes in the next
I
week.
hope so too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I got here late and you are,
My name's Anna Kaminsky. I'm from the Bulletin.
your name is what?
Anna Kaminsky.
Oh, Anna.
Yeah, I'm a reporter with the Bulletin.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. On the budget. Was this supposed to be 8/31? You have statement status as of 7/31/2022.
So on there, where it says 7/31, that is the date of costs paid through. So invoices received for the services in July
Uh-huh.
are paid in August. Therefore, it's the status of the what was paid through.
Oh,
It's paid in August for services rendered in July.
because I noticed that in the previous month's report,
Yes.
it was as of 7/30.
Yeah, I had it incorrect.
Which one is incorrect?
The previous. 7/31 relates back to payment. What was paid for?
So the July report should be read at 6/30.
I may have been on that.
No, it was a bad choice.
Yeah, I looked at it.
We actually have shoes. Yeah.
Yeah, because you went from 5/31 to 7/31.
Yeah.
Okay, so last month you're
Yeah.
at 6/30.
So.
It's
Yeah, I want to put now
Right.
into it.
because you're always
Before we.
really a month behind.
Yeah, but.
What you pay in August is for July services, and we report what occurs in August,
Yeah, so
in September.
so it's on a paid basis, not on
Right. Yeah, so that ties in what's spent today.
Yeah, I know, yeah. We had like 5 minutes. And it's amazing stuff. Okay. Let's. We had our 5 minutes. We're all feeling much more focused.
Okay,
So Miller Hall.
yeah, as we discussed, Miller Hall has been working through some conceptual designs in these buildings, and they've got some kind of exciting designs to share, so Ruth and Matt, I hand it over to you guys.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving us time on your agenda today. We'll give you kind of a concise update. I know you have a lot to cover today, so Matt, did you want me to share?
I can share my screen. Yep. Let me see. Okay. Are you seeing it or? You are,
A partial screen, I think we just need to go to, it's not showing the whole page quite yet.
because it's on the other side. I'm gonna stop sharing. Are you seeing it now?
Yeah, that looks good.
It's full screen, but not the first slide.
Trees, we see trees.
Yeah. Now my mouse isn't working. What's going on here? Okay. There we go. Sorry.
Well done.
Okay.
So, thank you, again. We have been, the collective team, architects, engineers, consultants, contractors, have been, embarking on the studies for, the Stevens Ranch location. And the parcel, as you're probably all very familiar with it, but if we go to the next slide, we have kind of just a diagram similar to what we did for Roble, showing the areas of the site that are really appropriate and most suitable for particular functions. So we know where we need to enter the site. We know how the sun and views, really are working. So the building area would be kind of on the southwest corner with associated outdoor space and loading space. And then really thinking about the entry to the site and the parking and the potential piece that you might sell to another buyer on the east side. And this is all based on conversations we've had with our traffic engineer, with the city, with the local developer, and understanding kind of where utilities come in, what traffic flow we can anticipate, et cetera. Go to the next slide. The team has been out to the site, a number of times, spent ample time walking and looking at views at different times of the day. It's a lovely spot. You'll have great views off to the west, as well as to the south. We also, if we go to the next slide, we did just at a cursory level, start as we walked, trying to understand if there were key significant trees that we would want to retain for their mature character. We have some ponderosa pines. We have some kind of undulation of the grade. So I think that'll be something we continue to look at to see if there are areas of the site that we should try to preserve because they already have well-established trees and plant life in it. So that's something we'll continue to study. These are two site plans, and I'll explain what you're seeing here, and then I'll pause. We have two ideas here. Option A is if you keep all of the acreage yourself, and option B is if you choose to sell off a particular portion, and we've shown that as a gray rectangle on the upper right. So the option A on the left shows all of the required parking areas. You access the site off of Santorini, and then we have really located the building in a large white rectangle, and that's facing kind of south-southwest. We need to have all of one facade within 80 feet of the right-of-way. So this is the location where we need to have the building positioned per land use code. And then we've really grabbed a nice area to the south and east that's shown kind of in beige, where we could start to explore ideas for outdoor space associated with the entry and spill out from the community rooms. And then the drive-up service window, loading, deliveries, et cetera, are all really kind of set apart to the north and east portion of the building. Now, the only thing that changes on option B is that we're kind of compressing all of the site design into a smaller area so that we can partition off that a little over an acre should you choose to sell it. So what that means is some of the beige outdoor area gets a little tighter. We start to think about just the distances between parking areas being a little more compressed, but we have the same number of parking stalls, same size building, all the same functionality in both options. And this just gives you the flexibility you know, if you choose to sell that acreage, you can see with confidence it all fits. Go to the next slide. We've just really barely started thinking about how your program would start fitting in the building, but we have some early enthusiasm around thinking about that first floor. Again, you come in and you see, you know, something for everyone. There's already an exciting kind of energetic and vibrant people space with activities and collection, you know, located. And then the community space meeting rooms are shown there on level 1 in orange. And then as we work our way up the building, thinking about the youth space collection and seating on level 2 and the adult collection on level 3. And we have kind of initial support for having a portion of staff space on every floor. What that does is it gives staff the ability to kind of spread out through the building. And there are some really logical areas where we can think about divvying that up so we don't end up duplicating operation space either. And then the section diagram on the right-hand side shows you how this idea or this kind of layering of your program would fit into the site condition at just a very early study level. And so I think this was the real kind of where we are to date with the Stevens Ranch location, and wanted to just give you an update. I think, yes, the only last thing is we've been talking a little bit more with our contracting partner, Kirby Nagelhout, and our structural engineers about trying to accomplish as much of the building structure with wood as possible. It gives you that really warm character, that inviting kind of setting that I think is very of the Northwest, very of Central Oregon. It allows us to think about sourcing that more locally. And so I think we'll continue to study that. It's just very early, so we don't have actual designs to show you at this point. We're quite a ways from that, but these are images of a building at Oregon State that would be similar in terms of the quantity of wood you might see in some areas. So we'll continue to update you on that as we go forward. I think that's all we had, unless I forgot anything, Greg or Todd, that you wanted us to mention.
No, let's see if we have questions from the board. At some point, we do need some weigh in on the board about an A or B as we move forward. Because as we do due diligence, figuring out how we're planning and designing, we need direction from the board that you prefer to use the whole site or to sell off acreage. Pointing out that acreage will help us with our budget. We didn't need the full 9 acres. So that's one of the reasons we had them bring that as well. Yeah.
Didn't you mention that an organization actually came forward and said they were interested in the possibility of being on the property with us?
Yeah, we've already been approached by a group that wants to start a children's museum that would be interested in purchasing that property, which we thought would be a great synergy. So that's a good indication of something that could happen there.
I guess my question would be, what is across Santorini Street from us?
Housing.
It's all housing.
Yeah. But it's medium density housing, so not kind of single family, but more of a townhome type scale.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about the compression of the parking, like what that would look like?
I think, yeah, great question. I think what you would see, and I'll try to point it out where it's visible in the drawing. I think it means a little less generous landscaping within the parking lot. So on the drawing on the left, you can see how there's the green areas that are horizontal between the parking aisles. Those really kind of go away on the right-hand scheme. And
Yeah.
so,
Oh,
and
if I could
yeah, go ahead.
chime in. So they're green planted areas, but they're kind of a safer pedestrian crossing. So you can kind of see, you can get out of your car and go along a pathway that then aligns with maybe a change in the paving so that vehicles are aware that these are areas where pedestrians would cross to the plaza area. Whereas in this kind of overall scheme, if you were to park here, you may have more pedestrians kind of walking in the drive aisles of this more condensed parking lot, and that there are kind of two primary kind of within the center of that parking area for pedestrians to safely cross.
And this is the parking, are the parking spaces allocated? Where do they fit in the city's regulations? Are these the minimum number of spaces, the maximum number of spaces?
They are the minimum, taking into account reductions that we can take for being adjacent to a bus or transit, as well as providing bicycle parking. So you get bonuses, or you get to reduce your parking demand based on kind of providing these different amenities. And so this is the minimum number. It is not kind of just a code standard compliant. We have reduced, and we're trying to reduce the parking on the site if we can, where we can.
Matt, can you point out where the bus stop is currently planned?
Yeah, so the Wilderness Way roundabout is here. And then again, just north of our site is some more medium density townhouses that will be located here. And the bus stop is going to be right kind of fairly close to the northwest corner of our site here. So pedestrians, there is a multimodal path, so bike and pedestrian path all along 27th, wrapping around to Wilderness Way, and also a safe crossing at the south of Wilderness Way. And that's kind of why we're also providing an entrance on the west side of the building, as well as from the plaza. I think we see the potential for both eventualities. Lots of people will be coming by vehicles and entering from the east, but there is a neighborhood to the west, as well as those coming from this multimodal path that they can come through on the east side. And we just wanted to make sure our building was engaging that.
And there's no difference in the size of the building from option A to option B. You just shrunk the outside portions a bit in the parking lot.
Yeah,
That's correct.
yep.
And that green area up in the north.
Yeah, so that would be the area that people would be walking to from the bus stop. So it's kind of the aesthetics of that, whether you had a nice outdoor area there. I guess my biggest concern, and I really have not come to terms with selling or not selling this piece of property, but I think of people using this library, and a bunch of, you look at the number of little kids, parents that are bringing small children to this library, and that safe pedestrian access from the parking lot is a big thing in my mind, because I want ways for people to be able to park and get into the building safely without walking where cars are driving.
I have a question on the portion that we could sell. Plan wise or by code, is there something that says what has to be in there? Could it be commercial? Could it be residential?
There are requirements. Yes, there are requirements. Go ahead, Matt. Sorry. It cannot be housing. It needs to be a commercial use.
Commercial use, and there is a wide range of retail, entertainment. It's all the kind of uses that are controlled by even our library use that would apply to this smaller parcel. But yeah, And it would, again, be partitioned off as a separate site. So they would have a building footprint and a parking demand that they would have to comply with on their site, that we wouldn't share parking or any other amenities.
And the part on option B, that additional, I just noticed that additional parking, is that what that is up there?
Mhm.
Right, exactly. So we could fit the majority of the parking along kind of the southeast corner of the site, but this doesn't cover all of the parking count that we would need for our library site. And so there would be kind of an overflow or the remainder portion at the north side of the site. And because we have kind of a staff entrance here, it isn't dissimilar to what we had at the previous Roble site where we had some staff parking on the south side of the building. That's roughly what we're kind of showing here. I think we could make it parking for all library visitors, but it probably will make more sense that if parking is available on the south side near the front entrance, people will gravitate to this parking lot first, and only in kind of high use times of the day that people might have to park at the north end, and that it would likely be used by staff more frequently, given that there will be a staff entrance on the north side of the building.
So that gray area is 1.3 acres.
That's correct.
What would be the price we would sell it for?
It would be anticipated to be at the same, as what our purchase price. Possibly adjusted slightly up because it's part of the component. Compass has advised us, when we looked at this, what could it be, but they said you should expect that you can sell it for what you've got into it and maybe a little bit more.
And how much would that be then?
The land that on the purchase price is like $25.11 a square foot.
And so this is,
What would this be worth?
right,
It would be on the magnitude of like about 1.4 million, I think, is the number. And that's, I'm trying to remember my math that I did. And that's calculated. It's in your head now. Yeah, the 1.3 acres, it has to be like detailed of exactly what that square footage is.
right.
That's
But somewhere in
a
there.
pretty close estimate.
1.3.
And I think what drove part of this was, when we did the test bits on this lot, as well as the north lot, which was a 10-acre piece up on, that was further north, and then the 10-acre piece over at the Easton property, that was at 15th and Knott. They were all, we could get, we didn't need the full amount, but the developers were saying, this is our piece of property if you want to buy it. So we could use all of it, but we asked them to say, look, if we don't need all, how much would be left over if we chose to present an option to sell this piece off and have a compatible user? You can see that it does reduce the amount of green area from a landscape maintenance of the property is going to be substantially less.
That's a big savings.
Yeah, and that's a long-term thing. I think the idea of the compatible use that came forward, I think that actually came forward even on the Roble site, because we had a piece of property on the Roble site that was a large area that we weren't using heavily. And so I think this is just looking at what is the option. I would say the other value considering option B is that we don't spend money on developing that 1.3 acres. And that's a sizable amount of money that goes into payment of the rest of what we do, as well as the cost, the resale, right? Those costs help balance the budget, right? And so I think that when we look at option B, it's a very feasible option to park to circulate and how the land would be used by the library. But on the financial aspect, option B brings some very financial benefits to the library in the development cost and in the operational cost on a long term.
Long-term continuing fixed cost.
Yeah, because you're maintaining less area
Right.
and less landscape. And so I think that's, you know, part of that decision of should we go with A or B?
If we sell the property in B, then we wouldn't have to go into an agreement with whoever owns the property about snow removal, things like that.
No.
It's totally up to them, right?
They
Their
would
property,
be,
and that's their problem.
yeah, as currently, you know, and that would be dealt with through the actual sale. Is there any, do we have a hard boundary around their property? Would we want them to have use of our drive aisles or not? But that would all be laid out in the purchase sale agreement. And if there was any shared aspects, they would then be put into a real estate agreement that defines between the library and that entity.
Yeah.
Any shared use of, most likely would be roadways.
Maybe so. What about in terms of infrastructure, the water, sewer, electrical lines? Totally separate.
It will be, the developer has already said, because we told them at the time when we said, hey, you have to purchase all of it. And we said, well, if we don't need it, do you want to buy it back from us? You want to keep it?
Bad chance.
And he said, no. And he said, well, then we would most likely look at an option to sell it off to somebody, and we will need utility services stuff to it. So as part of our agreement with the developer, they will provide a curb cut to Santorini for them to have direct access. They will stub in sewer, water, storm drain has to drain into direct ground, and then dry utilities, power and communications out of Santorini. That way, whoever purchases that lot doesn't have to tear up the street, because with new streets, the city, of course, doesn't want you to do that.
Right.
And this option was discussed with the city, with Miller Hall and ourselves, to make sure that, hey, do they see any problem with this lot being here where the proposed driveways are? And that was with engineering as well as planning, and they gave us their concurrence that this is a viable option for us to consider for the use, because like they mentioned, it's on the CG, which is a commercial code, and they said as long as the proposed buyer and whoever would build on it is building a compatible use, the location of the lot and how it would be done. And if we went forward with this, we would then ask the developer, when they do their tentative map, to create 2 lots for us. So we don't have to do anything. It's already set up that way. And they've agreed to do that if we choose this.
How much was it per square foot?
2511.
Matt, how many parking spaces do we have to have there?
I don't know the exact number, but I think we're in like the roughly 320 to 350 range. Is my recollection.
Yeah. And the size of the building?
Is 102,000 square feet.
And each floor will be a third?
Roughly.
Yeah.
But I maybe the ground floor will be slightly larger with the 2 floors above reduced by that amount, but maybe 5 or 10,000 on each floor.
Matt or Ruth, can you speak to, where the event space is? I don't believe that goes up 3 stories. Is that correct?
That's correct. That would be a lower space. We know that it wants to be taller than a typical floor. to accommodate the sight lines of the size groups that you typically have programming for. So it'll be taller than 1 story, but it won't be a 3-story space.
And on the site plan, you can kind of see this little notch where we're entering from the east and the west, and then this bay just to the south of that is where we're kind of initially thinking that those meeting rooms would be located, with the opportunity to maybe spill out into the plaza for outdoor programming. But that meeting room space would be located here and be that 1 story, or that like a higher ceiling height 1 story volume, whereas the 3-story volume of the library would be all north of that lobby entrance.
And if you remember the Roble site, that was actually very similar, where
Mhm.
we had 3 level and then the public space. It's a very similar idea and concept there, which I think we realized that, and they realized that idea worked well before.
The Rockville site went partially underground. Is this site, are they thinking about that for this as well?
Yeah, and I'll let Matt and Ruth kind of talk about that.
Yeah,
There's
we don't have, we do know there is some topography on the site. So we are still in the early stages of working with our civil engineer and landscape engineer to understand where the building wants to sit relative to that grading. So I don't think we will be in a situation where we have an earth sheltered, entire story like we did at Roble, but we do have the potential to capitalize on what the slope is doing. We have a height limit that won't change. It's the same as at Roble. So I think to be explored in more detail, I think. You can see the diagram on the right shows that we could potentially nestle part of the building down into the slope and kind of soften its appearance a little bit. But that does not mean that it would be a basement where we have, no daylight. We would still have quite a bit of access to daylight. So I think we're still exploring that piece.
Does that mean if the building were elevated to ground level on the left there, would it be above the height permitted?
No, what usually happens, Ray, is they have you take an average grade at a number of points around the building, and then calculate upward. So in any situation, we kind of have the ability to meet our height limit, but we do think there's some advantages to somewhat concealing the loading dock, or thinking about how we want to bring people in from the parking lot, because we do have a site that slopes a little bit, and we want to make sure we're addressing accessible grades both from the parking lot and from the street. If people walk up, we need to make sure we're creating an accessible route for them to get up to the building also.
Okay, any other questions for Ruth or Matt? Okay, is this just an informational only? Do you need a motion on
I don't
this?
think we need a motion. I do need some consensus around your interest in pursuing the option of selling the property, the 1.3. And help me out, Greg. I think that's going to help us as we move forward with our due diligence and design.
Yeah, as we would get through the completion of the due diligence. So it affects our budget, right? Do we anticipate that lot being there, for a sale, and to not have to build that improvement? And so that affects our budget analysis. The other in the due diligence is with the developer is to go back to them and say, okay, here's what we want to do with the property and how we want to do it. And just as he has said, we will provide utilities and stuff. Now he is working on, and they are working on developing their street improvement plans and their utility plans, and so they know that come out of due diligence, and assuming we move forward and we don't find anything, is that we'll start a more detailed level of coordination of where are the utilities going to go, where will the sewer and water. We have general ideas now, but it'd be much more detailed. And also for him to do the tentative plan, he would need to see that to say, okay, I know exactly how we're going to plot at your property so that we create two separate lots that we own so that we can sell that one. For us, having direction on if option B, I think, is the preferred option from the development team, from our team, design DPL, wanting to get board's interest and input on if that's a viable option. I think for the overall development from cost, schedule, use of the property, it's the best option that I would recommend. And so if it's something that you're open to, we'd like to know that.
Okay. Do we want to just pull forward and, okay, start at the end, Bunny?
I would be willing to go with option B, and so that if, for instance, I think the aspect of the children's museum there sounds fantastic. I wouldn't necessarily want to see a 7-Eleven.
Yeah, right.
So it depends on what it is, but I would be open if it is compatible with our library.
And
I agree. I agree. I think there's some real benefit for option B, budget wise, but also, as Bunny said, having kind of a cooperative venue there would be great to have a children's museum or something that we could really partner with. Through the library. I think that would be a huge benefit. Yeah, I agree. Not so much in favor of a convenience store, but we'll have to see.
we have some options.
Yeah.
I agree with what both Bunny and Ann said. I'd want to see something compatible on that piece of property.
Right. Okay, Ray?
So just to be clear, we'd be looking at 7.7 acres for the library itself.
It's
Nine
actually,
acres to start with.
it's like, I want to say it's like 9.5. 7 is what our actual acreage is. So off the 1.3 acres brings us down to around 8 acres, which is roughly the just a really ideal quantity.
So that's 102,000.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still have concerns about making decisions on a piece of property that we still need to make a decision on. I think selling the 1.3 acres, I'm not sure we can hold the buyer if somebody comes in and says, we gotta meet the requirements for a CG. We want to give you full sale price. Are we allowed to say, no, we don't want to sell it to you because we don't like what you're doing?
I think we are that we're allowed to look at, but I think that we have interest already that we would explore short term here between now and October to make sure that interest is still there. They've reached out saying they are interested. That's why the discussion about Children's Museum is there, is because there's an interested party who wants to be there with us. And so I think if you guys are in support of it, that we would advance those discussions between now and October to make sure that they truly are interested. We wouldn't be ready to enact any agreement, but we would know that, hey, this is a real opportunity. That who that user would be. Other uses that Compass has mentioned to me just in discussion is they felt that it would be a good parcel like a doctor's office, a dentist office, because of the proximity to all of the residential, the type of environment, They felt that there were other uses that would be of interest. When we asked about this with them as our real estate agent, hey, if we create this, what are we gonna do with it? And Dan, as you guys know, and Ron Ross, they all said no, that they felt that there are a lot of different, very compatible type businesses that would like to be adjacent to a public library.
No, that doesn't mean they've expressed an interest.
No.
This is all possible.
No.
Would,
But this is one user that did express an interest.
at what point would we then get a letter of intent from the children's?
I think eventually we would. I think that we would probably want to move forward with our due diligence and make sure we're comfortable with the property. But at that point, I would say there's no reason why we wouldn't immediately following due diligence completion. If we're moving forward with option B, that we would, yes, absolutely want to move right into that letter of intent, because ideally we would want them to be prepared to develop their piece of property in a reasonable timeline so that it doesn't sit vacant for a long period. And that we have that commitment that they are going to buy it.
Yeah, so just to get it straight in my mind. How much leeway do we have in rejecting an offer?
You know what, I really need to ask Compass if there's anything that, if somebody just Joe Blow comes out of the window and says, hey, I want to buy your piece of property, can we say no? You know, in our world, there's
Litigation and everything.
rules and stuff. I would actually ask him. Ask them, Compass,
I would want
to give us
know
that advice of, is there anything that we could find yourselves in
Yeah, I could see somebody want to
a
put a
compromise?
full service car wash.
Yeah.
I mean, and they've done that over there.
Well,
So
and
before I'm willing to say, yeah, A or B. I'd like to know what are the restraints on us if we do say. We want to sell the 1.3 million acres. What are our rights?
Right.
Okay, so at this point, I can't say one or the other. It's an interesting proposal.
Yeah.
And I need more information before I say one way or the other. I think that's the logical.
Yeah.
I think I'm premature.
I would add, Ray, that as part of the overall Stevens Ranch development, they have other areas that are designated as commercial, which I believe their intent is to develop retail aspects, office aspects, and industrial throughout their entire development. So,
Right.
you know, the developers, then we can bring in a compatible user, you know, that's allowed in there. They don't have any objections to us doing that. They know fully well that this is an option. But I think that they are going to be pushing, develop retail capacities, and we're really going to want, but we can ask Compass to advise us on
Let's find
that
out
question.
before we make it. So the architects to do one or the other.
Well, and my question was whether there are other commercial areas within Stevens Ranch.
Literally, in Ross Wilderness Way is another commercial lot.
Okay,
And on down, for the most part, all of 27th, other than the little bit of multifamily that's right next to our end.
mhm,
And then all the way down at Reed Market, they have more multifamily, but. If you remember, we looked at a really large CG lot up on the other side of the
right.
residential, just to the north. We called it
North, right.
Stevens Ranch North, and we were looking at would they sell off. Up there, it was about 10 acres. And they were willing to break it up, but their preference was to maintain, because they see that as being one of their large commercial opportunities. Probably more for,
Is that one still available?
we
The board.
we looked at both of those, and this was the, you know, the option that was chose because it was the same price. Wasn't a cost thing, it was a proximity and also the size. It didn't have. The way you entered into the site was not as conducive and it was off of the roundabout. So how people could turn in, they literally had to take a longer route.
Yeah, I think we debated that site fully at the time. I guess what I would say, I mean, obviously, this is not a,
Meeting on and they're talking about the property. And interesting conversation.
it's okay. I'd be in favor of option B, just with the understanding that safe egress from that parking lot would be a big consideration, that we have ways for get into the building safely, which I mean, I know that's, of course, you'll do that, but. And I kind of like it, in some respects, it's great that it isn't just the sea of parking in one big continuous stretch, that other parking is kind of off on the side, maybe less visible. So, yeah, no, so it sounds good, and I don't think we should like zero in necessarily on one perspective. I mean, it's great that we do have interest. Zero in on one prospective client, but I could see a number of different compatible uses from arts center types of uses, which I don't know where that effort stands, but I know that they've been looking for art center type areas, parks and rec, programming space, you know, there's a lot of different things that could go in there that would really be a great complementary use, so. Yeah, but checking out what are our rights as sellers.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can easily address, so that as we come back in October, we can talk about that follow-up. Because then if we're moving forward, then we would really be ready to release the design team to go full speed into schematic design, the next design phase.
Right,
And we would want at that time to
know that.
have that locked in, so that way we don't do something and have to erase
Right.
on the drawing
No,
board.
we don't.
Little as possible, and then they can go full speed ahead.
Okay, so any other questions from Ruth and Matt while we have them here? Okay, thank you very much. Those are exciting concepts, so we appreciate your work.
Thank you for having us today, and you know, appreciate the opportunity to give you the latest update.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good afternoon.
Are we good now? To have some lunch, or do you, how do you want to proceed here?
I think while they're still setting up, we might want to just finish off this early learning improvement.
Okay, I didn't know how long that was gonna take.
I don't think it should take too long.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
you know, within our program, and we identified the early learning aspects that will go into each of the libraries. Working with Miller Hall, we engaged with the firm Plus and Greater Than, who specializes in this. And what we wanted to do was to really go through the concept designs of what is early learning? What would we be doing and what is that going to really look like in the libraries? Because it really had an impact on the budget. Well, how much is this going to cost? Well, you're guessing at a very high level if you don't have any concepts. And it's just like, oh, we can go spend $10 or 10 million, right? So we engaged with them in Miller Hall to create that concept design that will be utilized throughout all of the libraries. It was advanced probably the most with Redmond, because Redmond is advanced so far enough in design, and Sisters in Lapine. But conceptually for all locations. And out of that, we refined what that concept was. And if you recall, we established for us, a $5 million budget. And then we worked with them to start saying, okay, how much? And that had to do with one of my budget adjustments is we took the 5 million and said, this much for this building, this building, this building, at our best estimate. Coming out of this study, they gave us a refined cost estimate of here's what we think we would spend at each location based on its actual size, based on the program, the concepts that were developed, and what types of things we wanted in early learning. And that was something they worked extensively with DPL staff to figure out. So coming out of that, they were then able to give us a final proposal for design fees and a detailed estimate of what's it going to cost to purchase and fabricate and install these elements. And a lot of them are similar to furniture. They're movable, things that kids get to play with and use and touch and feel. There may be a little bit that we have the general contractor build, but most of it is going to be more on a furniture type basis so that it can be moved around. That's where we're at today. We finished that study and developed the budget. And so the request is for approval for the design phase portion of this. And I think I had in there signing authority up to 750,000. And that would be an amendment to Miller Hall's contract, plus and greater than is a sub-consultant, just like the mechanical electrical engineer. They specialize in this. And so we would execute a contract amendment with Miller Hall to fully engage them. The balance of the funds will be the actual purchasing, which we will do in the future. After it's designed, we'll go out, get pricing, and then those will come back through our normal process for approval. So while in the summary, I think it's on the last page of the summary, was a breakdown of all the parts and pieces. And it does include East Bend. So we have that broken out from that. At this point, East Bend will go on hold, but we know what it will cost us if we say, hey, we're moving forward with that. Let's advance it. But that breaks down. You can see basically their design fees, their reimbursable expenses, and then all of the fabrication, which is where the bulk of the cost is, right? Is in the actual making. Plus and greater than, they don't build these things, they design them. But they have a lot of specialty fabricators that will be proposing on it. It'll be open public bidding to anybody who is qualified, interested in those components. That will happen out in the future. And built within it is roughly a 10% contingency within their cost estimate, which is very typical. Like with our FF&E, Miller Hall developed a budget for us. And
Well, I'm $400 lighter.
Oh, no.
so this is contingency separate from our contingency, the owner's contingency down below, which we carry, but it's an estimating contingency at this point. Questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question on this.
Okay.
On the preamble to this thing, the first paragraph, we're saying DPL determined the funding for the early learning improvements to be secured through grants and donations and not utilize the bonds funds.
Correct.
And DPL with input with Miller Hall establish a $5 million budget for improvements and goal for the fundraising. So what you're saying is, aside from this contract, you're saying that all of the funds for the early learning improvements, early learning, the children's discovery, those things are not going to come out of the bond.
Correct. It's within our big project. And if you remember on the sources of funds, on the cost report, there's a line item down there and it's called donations and grants.
Right,
And it has the $5 million budget.
right.
That's those dollars. So the money that pays for this is not part of the bond dollars. It's part of the donation and grant dollars. That will actually fund it. It'll just be constructed in concurrence, and we have to account for it separately. We have to track the dollars. That was one of the things that bond counsel advised us, that we can utilize any grants or donations that we get for the bond program. We just have to be able to, from an accounting standpoint, say this source here came in and was used for this component.
Right, so then, so two things here is, one, those grants have to be unrestricted then.
No,
Be restricted.
they would
or
be
exact-
restricted.
So you're gonna have to ask for grants
Yeah.
that are specifically for this.
Exactly, and that's what we normally do anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
The greater concern I have is in the ballot measure. We actually said projects are expected to increase space for community use, children's discovery and learning. Is what we're saying now, the funds from the bonds are not being used for children's discovery and learning. They're
No,
being used for the grants.
no,
What this is so within the building are complete children's areas that, you know, the bond funds are paying for. These are additional, like I said, they're more furniture. They actually, there's probably very little, right now, there's no money in our construction budget because everything we've looked at are play elements. Things that the kids use and play. Is how I describe it. So those are the components that we will buy. The spaces are already being built by the bond dollars as part of each building. These are enhancements really to that area.
But if these are like furniture. Furniture is part of the budget for the construction. Coming out of the bond.
They're like furniture in that they are not fixed to the building.
Right,
They're not necessarily furniture that you would sit in like a chair, but they're movable objects that you could pick up and take out of the building.
right.
And
The more
remove
items
it.
they play.
And, you know, that's why it's like an FF&E item versus the actual building. The furniture within the building is a separate budget. We have a FF&E budget, which is part of the bond dollars to buy all of the furniture, the shelving, those components. These are add-ons to both the building creating the space, the furniture budget, fitting out the space with furniture, shelving, collections, all of that. These are the enhanced learning elements that.
You know, my concern is, you know, with like all the videos that we showed to the public, all the drawings and that we showed to the public for the children's areas that they were gonna get for their tax dollars. Shows all of this materials and everything, the furniture, the toys, whatever we have in there, as the Children's Discovery and Learning Center. They were gonna get more of that for their tax dollars, and now we're saying you're gonna get the shell. And everything else is gonna come from grants.
All right,
Then
from
as,
the very,
as a member of the taxpayer, then I would say, why did I pay more for this in the taxes? If you're gonna furnish it all, the stuff that really makes it matter to the kids and parents, the toys that they have are coming from grants. Why am I paying it out of my taxes also? They're led to believe this is the total package they're getting for the Discovery Center, right?
no.
I'm just concerned that they're gonna look at this, and say, we got photographs, we have pictures, drawings of the Discovery Center. We have videos that show kids from the Discovery Center. But now you're telling me, well, actually, we're gonna build the room. But all those other things. We're not what you pay tax for.
Well, Ray, were you not aware that there was a grant component and a capital
Oh, that's
campaign? No,
The grant components for more, for anything we can get in addition is to add on, right?
That's.
So now we're
what
saying
you're
these were add-ons and not. Probably should
I
not
don't-
have thought of that as being part of the Discovery Center at all.
No, the Discovery Centers are still part of this overall project. This is an enhancement to those Discovery Centers. Right, and that's what we do grants for all across the board.
So
It's just
tell me
like when we
what's-
did the computers in downtown Van,
what's
that
in
was
this-
through
what's
a
in the
grant.
Discovery Center that the bond is paying for.
It'll be a lot of those, for all the furnishing that you see for kids, like lower level chairs and fun little booths and things for them to play with. We'll have different areas with different types of manipulatives. This is an enhancement to that. It's kind of bringing it to a higher level. So just like if you go next door, we'll have similar to what downtown Bend has, and that's what the bond will pay for, which is exciting. And that's a nice discovery, play, learning space. And then the grants are going to enhance that for our communities.
So the other concern I have is what if you don't get 5 million in grants?
Yeah, so then we would maybe not have as much enhancement, but the structure and the discovery spaces will still be in every one of our libraries for children.
Will they
It'll
look like
just be at a
what we
lower,
showed them in the video and send us the pictures?
not exactly, because we don't know yet what we're building, right? Those were pictures of ideas. Those are, but the concepts, yes. Yes, it won't be identical. No matter if we get 10 million, 5 million, we're creating something new. Those pictures are used to give people an idea, their concepts. We're not trying to cheat the public in any
Oh, no, I don't
manner.
think we're trying to cheat the public. I'm just saying that the public may look at this and like, wait a minute. Didn't I pay for what you're showing me?
Well, and I think what we're going to deliver is exciting children's discovery areas, and that's the whole point. And if we can make them better through additional funds, I mean, we want to provide the best possible experience to our kids that we can. And this is an area that it's a really attractive area to get grant funding in. And so that was part of the plan from the very beginning. I mean, we talked about that from the very beginning when we were developing the budget. We talked about potential grant, the grant components, the capital campaign component of this budget. So that's been a part of this from the very beginning.
So let me get straight then. Nothing we're planning to do for the children's areas is being reduced in any way.
Don't the videos
Right.
and pictures also show people using computers and books, and that's not part of it? I mean,
Fun little furniture.
But to answer your question, no, nothing is being reduced. This is all about adding more,
Enhancement.
Adding more.
Okay,
and it's, as we said, it's through the grants and donations, not increasing.
yeah, so what was thrown at me was the statement that DPL determined the funding for the early learning improvements would be secured through grants and donation and not utilize the bond funds. We should actually state, in addition to the bond funds, these grants would be used to enhance what's already set in place for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. This implies to me that we're taking it away from the project and putting it into grants instead, or getting it from grants instead. So what you're saying is, no, that's not true. These are going to be funds that if we get them, we'll add on. But if we don't get them, we're still going to have basically the really good, fantastic children's discovery and learning centers that we have. Right?
Yes.
Nothing's going to be decreased. Okay,
Will be on
so I think we're change the verbiage on that to really reflect that.
Again, Ray, I think though that you're so concerned about the public is going to question us. And I think that we all feel very confident that whatever their confusion or questions on this might be, they will easily be answered by Chantal or Greg or this board. And I feel confident that we can answer those questions quite adequately.
I agree, but I'm just saying here, when it has written, that was confusing to me. We should write it more clearly as to what we're actually doing before this goes out to the public and they say, oh. And now we have to go back. Always better to say things clearly.
Okay. All right, are there any other questions or comments? I would entertain a motion on authorizing signing authority, and there's some suggested verbiage here. Would anyone like to make a motion? Okay,
I move to authorize the library director signing authority up to $750,000 to execute a contract addendum with Miller Hall for early learning design services. I'll second.
okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, I think we're ready to take a break. When should we reconvene? What's your pleasure?
Let's see, we all have to take our talking back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or grab some food, maybe. Yeah.
what do you think?
1 o'clock's good.
1 o'clock? Okay, we'll adjourn until 1 o'clock.
You need this in the.
We'll call the meeting back to order. So
Sorry,
there will be some delays for chewing,
I had
but
a mouthful of food.
yeah,
So I'd like to introduce our strategic operations plan. And this has been a big effort with our entire staff. And so I'm going to turn this over to Sarah Bryan. She's going to walk us through the process we did and then open it up for questions. So Sarah, take it away.
All right, thank you, Todd. Everybody can hear me okay?
Sorry, and Sarah's our learning and development manager, program manager, and I believe she spoke last month. So you may remember from that. So thank you, Sarah.
All right, can you guys all hear me? Yes, no, maybe? Can you guys hear me? Just want to check my audio.
Yes.
yes.
Okay, excellent. Every time I change platforms, I was on a Google meeting today. The audio systems are all different, so I appreciate that. And if at any time you cannot hear me or audio goes out or something, just let me know. All right, well, let's just get started here. I know Todd had sent everyone I believe a PDF file that has a lot of the information that I'm going to cover in it. And so I'm just going to highlight a few things like Todd said at the end. Certainly, please feel free to ask questions. What we are going to talk about today, expectation-wise, the strategic operations plan. The first question is, what's the plan origin? Why was it even created? And then we're going to take a look at the plan development. So how we actually developed the entire plan. And then we will go into an overview of what the plan includes. I want to pause for a second, make sure there were any other expectations that any of our board members had besides what I'm sharing with you right now. I'll look over to my right where I have your little video. Everybody sound pretty good with that plan? See some heads nodding. All right, we'll keep chewing on your food and I'll start going through it here. So here is the plan origin, the origin story of the strategic operations plan. Back in November of 2021, the library board yourselves set the results policies prioritization for the library district, which are all of those long-term outcomes that you are hoping to see fulfilled. The question is, how are we going to do that? And you can see on the left here, we need to know what activities, who's going to be involved, and what are those details. In order to do that, it was decided that a strategic operations plan was going to be the best answer, because what that does is it provides that company-wide business plan, kind of like the roadmap, which is going to detail strategies, activities that are going to help us achieve those long-term outcomes. But it also provides the vision for getting there. And hopefully you are all aware that the vision is critical to helping employees throughout the district really understand and start to connect with why we're doing what we're doing and what that end goal is. So from that, we started to actually develop the plan, and the development has taken, as you can see here from this diagram, several months. Started back in January, and actually it even started prior to that. You had some interaction with Chris Van Dyke going through that visioning process, because the vision of the entire district is part of this as well. So there were things that happened last year in 2021, but the big focus and the meat of work happened this year. So in January, the plan started to become more real, and we went out to staff to share the information and wanted to get their feedback. So in January and February, a big focus was, here are kind of the outline of the plan, what we think might work, and employees, what do you think? We had surveys, town halls, that new employee advisory committee that you learned about not too long ago, all provided feedback so that we could see what would work for our employees, but also there's so many perspectives that need to be accounted for, things that maybe the management team or supervisors might not think of. So in March, after collecting all of that feedback, we went out through our blog and our staff meetings to provide what we heard. And this was really important throughout this entire process. You'll see a lot of this sharing back with employees, because transparency is really critical. We could continue to get feedback, but if employees don't feel that we're doing anything with it, that's just going to decrease trust and employees really wanting to provide feedback. So we were very transparent, saying, here's all the information that we collected. And then that next step is, okay, now we need to work in April to start updating the strategic operations plan based on what employees provided us as their feedback. So that happened. And then in May, as you can see, we shared the plan updates so that they could see where those impacted pieces were, what was changed based on that feedback. And then in June, you're thinking, well, that's enough. Gosh, you've asked a lot of feedback. Feedback is critical. And so it was these previous feedback points were all pieces that were mandatory. So people that really felt that they had the time to provide feedback, or they had a really great idea at the time, were able to do so. But what we wanted to do was make sure that every voice had the opportunity to speak up. So every person had the opportunity. So in June, we actually had an all-staff strategic plan event where we had everybody together. And for that time, libraries weren't open. And it was kind of like an all-staff day, but during June, we still did it through Zoom because of COVID. And not only at that time did we ask for feedback one last time, but that's when we started to really help staff connect with the details that we'll share later, so that they could start to see that vision and see how the strategic plan was going to be used in their daily work, giving them a little bit more direction. And then in July, we again shared back that feedback so that they could see that, yes, we're listening, we're using it, and we are not discounting any information that you are sharing. And then in August, we went out with the final draft, and the word draft is key because this is a live working document. Things will be updated as the world changes, as our activities change and priorities change, but we do have a solid map and direction for where we're headed. And that leads us to September. We are now here, and it's time to start implementing some of the pieces of the strategic plan. And that very first slide you saw, this is not a, between now and 6 months plan. This is over several years because the goals are very large and they go to those results policies that you set. It's going to take time to implement different activities in order to achieve those results that we're hoping for. Any questions before I move on to the outcomes? What does this actually look like?
Any questions? No?
Okay. All right, so we know the origin, we know how we developed it, and here are the outcomes. This is what the strategic operation plan is. We have a nice mission statement that is really easy to understand, easy to remember, and that is the Deschutes Public Library enriches the community through equitable open access to books, services, and resources that inspire people to reach for their dreams. So this mission statement isn't just about, here are the activities that need to be done, but you can see that it really should invoke emotion. And that's what's going to tie not only our employees, but our community to it and really feel empowered and excited about what we're doing. And then the vision statement takes it one step further. And this is really, let's say 100 years down the road, what is that we want to achieve? And we want people to learn, thrive, and connect to one another in the world. Again, this is one of those emotional invoking statements to connect people, because we know deep down, emotions are what connect people and get people excited. So from there, we have the mission, the vision, and the core values. So the mission and vision that's where we are aspiring to be, what we're going to work towards every day. But how are we going to do that as our employees are sitting there going, great, how is that going to happen? Core values are going to embody those behaviors. So employees now can look at these core values. And again, these are core values that they said are most important. We did a lot of survey and feedback work on this. So we have accessibility. As employees, we eliminate barriers and create experiences accessible to all. Community, we foster connections and work together to build a thriving, resilient community. Equity, diversity, and inclusion. We celebrate differences and provide free and equitable access to library resources and safe spaces without judgment or bias. Lifelong learning. We find innovative ways to inspire and support lifelong learning in a diverse and changing social landscape. And then service excellence. We bring respect, compassion, integrity, and expertise to every interaction to make a positive impact in the lives of others. So these values are pieces that we are going to be now including not only with the mission and the vision into our work and our goals and our performance management. These are things that every employee can think about in the actions that they are doing every day in their work. Are they thinking about these pieces and how that affects what they're doing and working with the customers? And then the last piece, because we have the vision and the mission where we're headed, we have the behaviors. Great, but what do we actually do? And the strategic goals are big buckets, because there's going to be several items under each of these that will be those small goals that will lead to this big picture goal being achieved. And you can see the objectives. So the first, and I say first, but there's no particular order. These are going to be worked on probably simultaneously at some point as we have, just the availability and what the priorities are in the moment. But we have design, construct, remodel buildings. You're very familiar with this one, but that's to create, expand, and improve library buildings to provide world-class service to our communities in Deschutes County. We have create a culture of trust, which is a more inclusive environment where staff are engaged and feel free to contribute ideas that make an impact on the organization. The more trusting environment, the better services we're going to be able to provide, because our staff members are going to feel really good about what they're doing and feel that if they have an idea, they can voice that, and we can provide even better services that we are providing today because we have this culture of trust built. We have prioritized equity, diversity, and inclusion, a workplace culture committed to learning and integrating EDI principles into everyday practices. And EDI, although it's called out here, it was called out in one of our values. It really is an umbrella piece. These are things that we have to think about in all of the actions that we do. Reimagine the organization model. So review and implement organizational improvements to meet the needs of staff to better serve our communities. Take a step back and see where we are today versus where we project ourselves in the years ahead. And do we have a system in place to support not just our staff members, but then the community as well. And then engage with the community. create thriving community relationships with current and potential customers and partners to foster pivotal services for Deschutes County. A lot of this work, we're going out to the community to do this, but this is another piece where what else can we do? There's always going to be something else that we can do to connect with our community and provide all of those services and all of those things that you have in those results policies. So with that said, I know that was a lot of information and you did have that packet ahead of time. Do you have any questions? And I'll leave this up in case you do, otherwise I can close it out.
Questions?
Sorry, one
Honey?
question, timeframe to implement certain things, is there a timeframe associated with this?
Yes.
Okay.
This goes through 2024. And so we are actually breaking it down on a year by year basis. We have actually started working on prioritizing equity, diversity, and inclusion. We've done a lot of management training around that. We're about to launch feedback training for all staff. And that may sound familiar to you. That is actually something that the board approved funding for. The reimagining the organizational model is also one of the first ones we're going to tackle, especially looking at the fact that we will be growing with new buildings and making sure that we have the right structure and staffing to make sure we're successful for that. So we'll be starting to look at that right away. Obviously, we have been working on the design, construction, remodel buildings. And the creative culture of trust, which you saw last time, it's something that we've also been working on, starting the employee engagement committee, creating more town halls, and we'll be doing some more projects around that just to continue to build there. And then the last one is engaging with the community, and that's the one where we have identified that as in future year project, because we've got a lot on our plate with these others right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can you, when you have community, foster community connections and work together to build a thriving, resilient community? And then on the objective, you have create thriving community relationships. Can you expand on that one, especially on the part where it says create thriving community relationships with current and potential customers and partners to foster pivotal services? What does this mean?
It's really taken to effect that we don't just decide here's something we think the community needs and go and implement it, but really working with community members to find out what are their needs and how does the library interact with that, so that we're designing services really along with them to make sure that we're bringing services to them.
With them, not for them.
Exactly.
Right.
And then kind of a good example of that are some of the work you saw that our community librarians are doing outreach out in the community. Really starting with a lot of listening first before designing them.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And then just a comment, the create a culture of trust, the objective of a more inclusive environment.
Yeah.
But why don't we say not a more inclusive, but just an inclusive environment? And I thought we had on one of our policies that you will create an environment of participation, openness, and whatever, paraphrasing. But it's basically people to speak out without fear of being retribution or anything like that.
Right.
We have that. So this is expanding upon that and saying this is important.
Yes, and acknowledging that we're not 100% successful at that. That comes up in our employee engagement surveys. It's something that's definitely come up with COVID, just that's really hampered our communication with staff. And then just knowing that we need to do a better job of listening and interacting. That's exactly what we're doing with employee engagement. Sorry, the employee. Too many comments. The employee action committee, where we're making sure that we're finding, rather than just saying we're open, finding actual ways to foster feedback and engagement. That's part of what I just talked about with, as Sarah said, the equity and diversity and inclusion kind of permeates through all of this. And a good example is the training we're about to do about giving and receiving feedback with staff. That's designed for 100% of our staff, and really acknowledging that, yes, we have in the past said, yeah, here's ways that you can come and give your ideas, but how effective have we been at that? Even if we say we're open, do people still have the trust to do that? And so really giving ourselves tools and our staff tools to make sure that we're actually implementing that, rather than setting up the framework and saying we have it, but actually trying to dig in there and make sure we're doing it.
So do we have ways to measure success here?
Yes, one big one is the employee engagement survey that we do every 2 years.
Good.
And we just closed that one, and I'll probably have a report for you in the either next month or the month after on our latest results.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you, Sarah, and all of the employees that took the time to do this hard work, because I know it's an extensive effort. The few words that end up being on the page, I know are fiercely debated, and there's a lot of work that goes into these, and I find them really aspirational and inspirational. So I think you guys did a great job on really capturing what we do and what we seek to do in a concise form. So I think you guys did a great job. In having been involved in other strategic planning efforts, most recently on the State Library Board. We've got this high level expression of what we're seeking to do, and then there's a lot of activities that go under each thing. That how are we going to achieve these goals? And this is, I'm just speaking on my own, but to me, this work is central to what we do. And it's really important for me as a board member, and I think for all of us as board members, to really understand the work that you're doing, because it's really important work. And I would welcome the opportunity to, and I don't know what this would look like, rather focus on each one of these areas, you know, and have staff presentation on these are the things that we're doing to achieve this goal, with quarterly updates, happier, whatever makes sense. But I'd like to learn more detail about what you're doing in each area, just so that I can be better informed as a board member. I think this is at the core of what this institution is all about. So it's really important work. So I would love it if you guys came back and did this on a regular basis. And I don't know how because it's great work. So.
And I highlight, I know we said it, but as you see, we listed the committee members here who did an amazing amount of work on this on page 2 of the report, but also I can't emphasize enough, and Sarah had a huge amount of work with this. The amount of work we did to get feedback from all staff, it's it really, one, it stretched out what we were doing from a 2-month process to a 6-month process. It really, the product we got was so much better. The fact that I can confidently look at this and say this, all of the wording, when you're asking about a certain word,
Yeah.
it represents deep discussions with all of our staff. And so that's an exciting piece for me. Even that culture of trust piece, this is starting to lay the groundwork for building that up, because they were all involved in this from the beginning. And that is not something that I have seen in past efforts. And so that's an exciting part for me, that we have been able to really reach out to staff on this.
Yeah, and I guess, my comments are aimed at, I know that you intend for this to be a living document, and that this isn't gonna be we checked that off the list and let's huck it in the drawer and never look at it again. So that's the reason I would like to see detail and progress towards these goals, information about that for us, the board, not for us to micromanage or meddle in what you're doing, but just so that we're informed. And to be better board members. So, I'll leave
Good.
that up to you, Todd.
No, that's
to
great.
Figure out what that looks like, but
Actually, I appreciate the opportunity to do that, because that's our biggest, we talked about that from day one, is we did not want this to be a document that we write and stick on a shelf.
right.
And that's always the fear with this. So having people that are willing to check in and hear what we're doing, that adds that level of making sure that we're continuing to do it and pay attention to it. So,
Right.
and we're putting a lot of effort into it. We'd love to share it.
Yeah, no, these are the kinds of presentations that I think are just super valuable board education pieces. And so thank you and thank to everybody on the committee and all the employees that participated, because I think that's what really breathes life into the document, is that everybody has ownership. Everybody feels like they made a contribution and they understand what these words mean. So,
Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You guys have a lovely day.
Now we have executive limitations budget resolution. Todd?
Okay, the resolution that won't go away.
Yeah. That's what I was saying.
This is part of our learning process with the bond language. And this is actually our first year. We kind of did this last year, but it's really our first full year of what it looks like for asking for funds for taxes for the bond. And what I brought you last time, we had the bond debt service fund, and basically the amounts that you see here, and it's all of the changes revolve around this last paragraph. Be it resolved that the board of directors hereby implements tax provided to adopt the budget rate of 55 cents per $1,000. That's our general fund.
Mhm.
And then the assessed, so that's that. And then in the amount of $10,285,600 for bonds. And the amount that I put in here last time, that was the full amount of our bond program, but not what we're asking for in taxes. And so the county assessor was asking to be very specific about the amount we're asking for taxes. And that was the nuance that slipped past us, slipped past our accountant. So we are updating this to reflect that. And this is the amount, and I should bring it up, that you already approved in the budget. We have let me bring it up, because it'll also give me here we go. There, I look. And budget. Okay. Okay. I'm highlighting this, this line, let's blow it up so you can see it, and of course, everything's sitting on the line. Oh. Okay. So as you approved in the budget, estimated, taxes estimated to be received, $10,285,600.
Okay.
So basically just tying those two together, and that's what this change does.
Any questions for Todd? Okay, if not, I would entertain a motion to move the revised budget resolution.
I move to approve the revised budget resolution number 9, second revision.
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay. So, library news, Todd.
Well, our big library news was the strategic plan, so I won't take up too much time, but I do want to highlight, if you had trouble parking, our programs are back and people are coming out in droves. And we're seeing that, especially with our story times. I think the other day we had 67 people at a story time next door. And well, Liz is here. She can probably tell us about how it's going with the other programming around the district. But as far as I've heard, we've got people coming back.
Yeah, it's fun to see people back and they are just really appreciative and just really grateful to be back in the community with each other. Our team is busy trying to innovate and keep programming it at the level that people have come to expect. And we're proud of the work they're doing.
And I'll highlight, we just hit 1 million views for
Pickleball. Just barely eked out the Bigfoot video. It's been a hotly contested competition between popularity of Bigfoot or pickleball.
All right. That is news you can take home and just savor.
That's right.
and then one last thing for library news. I'm just going to plant the seed, but I think before we finish, I'd like to discuss it. Is this was planned to be a work session day, and I switched the schedule because I thought we were going to be discussing the Stevens Ranch property, but that turned out to be October. Still, we needed the time, but we do have coming up. We do need to schedule a work session to go over results policies, prioritization. And I also need feedback from the board about are there any other areas of that you feel we need to cover in any upcoming work session. So maybe think about that, and when we get to the end, we can go.
Right.
Should we just send that to you?
You could send that to me, or you can just put it out here if you're either way. That'll help me just in planning. The first one will definitely be the results prioritization, but that may not take the full time. If we set aside a work session, we could add to that agenda, so that would be helpful.
Yeah, and we did decide that we're having them on the day of the board meeting, and that works best for everybody, right? Because, yeah, I think in my mind, we were kind of scheduling them as needed because we set them up quarterly and then we have been adding them in as we needed to talk about other things. And so that's kind of the model I was basing it off. I'm sorry for the confusion over the starting time. Yeah, so if you have ideas of things that we need to address, that we should talk about, let's put them out on the table and.
I would also check in because last year we did results priorities in November. And if we stick with that, that would mean starting at 9 AM in November.
Yeah, and I think that's one, because that's when we typically do with Margot.
Oh, and the schedule for as well.
Yeah, and so he'll need to schedule her. If that, is everybody in agreement that we should do that then?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that way we can get on her days.
When will that November meeting be?
Oops. Yes. Right.
Okay.
So we'll start November 9th at 9.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, you're up for foundation.
Okay, foundation news, foundation's meeting tonight. So I don't know, do you want to talk about novel idea? Or, well, about,
Possibility.
well, or what's going on with the historical society? That's what I was saying.
Why don't you?
Because I found that really exciting.
Yeah, so if you're not aware, Novel Idea will be celebrating its 20th anniversary. Who imagined that the whole project would have such longevity, but here we are 20 years later. I was having a meeting with Kelly and her staff about something altogether unrelated. And we started talking about the 20 years of Novel Idea, and they're all big fans. And we just started floating around some ideas, and they are going to be hosting for a month and a half a Novel Idea 20-year exhibit. So Chantal and I have been digging through all of our boxes of ephemera. And we have an amazing collection of artifacts, we'll call them.
Magnets.
Oh, we have shirts and aprons and mini trucks and water bottles. It's crazy. So we're super excited. Some of the quilters have been contacted. They're going to donate or let us use some of their quilts. We're going to have a highlight reel from all the videos from over the years, which I've been reviewing and really taking a joyful walk down memory lane of the amazing authors that we've had as part of the program. Will make you laugh and make you cry. Super exciting.
Well, I was excited when I heard about it, and I think that's just, I mean, our partnership with the Historical Society is really a great one of kind of cross-seeding each other and amplifying the work that each of us does. So I'm just really excited by that, and I think it just shows a lot of how important this program is to building community. I mean, I think it's one thing that is really, really treasured by the residents of Deschutes County, and it was one of the things that was really missed during the pandemic, even though you guys pulled off amazing things, and it was still.
And we're really glad we don't have to do that this year.
Yeah, no,
last year.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was, but people really missed it. And I've had lots of people comment on how happy they are that it's back in person. Yeah, so anyway, so that's some good news from the foundation, but everything else is going along. Okay, any critical communications coming out of this meeting that we need for Todd to put out to the public?
I did not identify any from this meeting.
Okay. All right. Self-review. Shall we start with Bunny?
That's what I was at the end.
I know, well, it's just like, it's easier for me to keep track.
I wanted to thank Greg for the detail that he put in your presentation, and not just current detail, but projections of what you will see in the future, and so that we know what to expect. I appreciated that. I also appreciated Norhol, working to try and preserve trees and land contours. That environmental makes me feel quite nice. I did want to make a comment that, on DPL outreach, I'm on another board, Oregon Adaptive Sports, who has reached out to DPL outreach and to say, is there a way we can have any coordination here? And in our last meeting, the people who had been a part of reaching out to DPL and looking at the truck and what all went on were so impressed. I mean, they just kept going on and on about how much. Don't know, you know, it'll work between the two, but they were so complimentary, and that made me feel good. And then the last thing, I want us all to remember our meeting with Margot, and that we're all in this together. We will not have any surprises, any letters to the editor, or things that aren't talked about ahead of time. And so I want us all to be very conscious about being transparent with our thoughts and our plans, sort of thing. That's it. Thank you.
Good meeting for a second, but Bonnie said, Craig, we always appreciate your reports, you're thorough.
Good.
And make it easy to understand, so that's greatly appreciated. I also want to thank Sarah for her presentation on the strategic plan. I think it really reflects the quality of DPL staff in their program. Just really appreciate that, and look forward to having reports back, you know, as time goes on the objectives that you outlined.
I also, Greg, I appreciate not only what Bunny and Ann said, but also your patience and willingness to respond to all of our questions. I know for myself, a lot of times it's due to the fact that I don't understand something, so I appreciate that. And one of the things I really liked about Sarah's presentation is it really shows a commitment on DPL staff to listen to one another and to build on a communication, which is so vital. And I think that's fantastic. I look forward to next month's meeting and hearing our report and hoping we get to move forward.
Yeah, I agree. Kudos to Todd, Sarah, and the rest of the committee members. Chantel. This is few organizations, few agencies can do something like this, where you're really empowering the staff, the employees, to have a say in how the library is run, knowing what the vision is, the mission is, to critical, having reached that together as a group is absolutely critical. So few organizations, especially government agencies, which we are, will do something like that. This is not top down, nor is it just bottom up. It's we're all in this together. And I've always said, the library is not the building, it's not the books, it's not the media, it's the staff. If the staff is great, you have a great library. Doesn't matter what the building looks like. And we're making it really great. We're going further into going back and saying, pandemic set us back tremendously. But we're going to come out of this and be even stronger and more coherent as a library unit, which is great for everybody, especially our community. So kudos for doing this. Great, thanks for your reports. Always interesting, always, I think they're excellent. Keeping us on budget, knowing what's going on. That's great. Appreciate it.
I thought it was a productive meeting and I appreciated your reports and the thoroughness and the clear explanations. I think we have some exciting possibilities ahead of us. And so I appreciated Miller Hull's clear explanation of alternatives on the land. And I look forward to a full report next month so that we can come to an informed choice on property purchase. And I really appreciated the strategic plan segment. And I think, as I said, I think this is just core to what we do. And it's been interesting to follow this visioning from start to where it is right now and to read those words that talk about our mission and values. And I think they capture what we're trying to achieve perfectly. I think I really appreciate the work that's been done by staff. So I look forward to more detail in the future because I think us being informed board members is critical to us doing a good job and being able to explain to the public what we're trying to achieve here in our libraries. So I appreciate it a lot. So Todd?
Thank you. I'll echo all that. I would like to offer a gift to Bunny. Bunny's heading off tomorrow and, but she signed up for check signing. So if anybody else would like to step in, okay, thank you, Ann.
I'll do it. I will do it.
No idea how much I need to get done.
No, I understand. I have felt your pain in other circumstances. There's been more than one meeting where I've left the next day. Yeah, there's a lot that needs to happen.
Somebody signed checks for me last time too. I don't know who did.
I think I did it. Because I was,
Anyway, I appreciate it because I had an emergency with my daughter, so
Yeah.
I appreciated that.
okay, well, with that, I think we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Sure.
Thank you.
No, that's my line.
Somebody said.
I'm fine.
Excited about it. And I said, you know, it's